Right. Good morning, members, and welcome to the meeting of the Peak District National Park Authority, Friday the 9th of May 2025. Apologies for absence. I have apologies from Andrew Gregory and Rachel Bennett, also from Andrew Hart, who members might not be aware, but has had an amputation and he's been 5 weeks in hospital and necessarily isn't with us. He's expressed a definite intention to recover swiftly and be with us again, but both Phil and I have said that we thought perhaps his health and recovery was more important than his attendance at authority meetings. Whether, of course, Andrew will take note is up to him. But I think we send our best wishes for his speedy recovery nevertheless. Does anyone bring any other apologies from any other members? If not, we move on to item 2, which is minutes of the meeting of Friday the 21st of March. Are there any corrections that anyone wishes to register? If not, could I have a proposer? Charles Greaves, thank you. Martin, second. All those in favour of accepting the minutes? Thank you, members. That's unanimous. I've not been informed of any urgent business. Are there any particular declarations of interest from members that they would wish to make? If not, thank you. I have not been informed of any public participation, which is agenda item 5, which takes us on to agenda item 6, Chair's briefing. And there's a degree of similarity between what I'm going to say and what the Chief Exec has said in his report, but insofar as we've been attending some of the same things recently. So from my perspective, in addition to the weekly briefing meetings with the Chief Exec and the Deputy Chair and attendance at planning and P&R committees, I attended a National Parks Partnership EGM at the end of March, which was basically about alterations to the banking arrangements and authorising particular users of credit cards and things. It was an important but brief meeting. Beginning of April, I was interviewed as part of the assessment of our Investors in People programme. Excuse me. It was a very positive interview, and the consultant was positive about the indications for the authority, though, as far as I'm aware, we haven't received the notification of the outcome of that assessment yet. But I hope that it will at least maintain our position as a silver holder. On the 4th of April, after the briefing with the Chief Exec and Deputy Chair, both James, as Deputy, and myself had an introductory meeting with our Business Transformation Manager, Dan Smart, which was very useful, and he's already working quite hard within the confines of his 2-year contract, looking at business transformation, as his job title requires. Again, 7th and 8th of April, as has been described in the Chief Exec's report, we attended a meeting of National Parks England, organised by the South Downs National Park Authority, based in Lewes, on the south coast. And I don't think I've much to add to the description that is in Phil's report, so I'll leave that one, I think. On the 9th of April, and then again on the 26th of April, along with a few other members, I participated on the 9th in a 90-minute workshop with the Youth Impact Collective, again as described in Phil's report, and then on the 26th, from 10 in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon on a Saturday. There was a day-long workshop held here in Alden House, which was really useful, looking with the consultant to progress the programme and the development work for the Youth Impact Collective, which I think is beginning to develop into a really useful method of incorporating the views of younger people. their attendance at these kinds of meetings such as this would significantly lower the average age, which is what it's intended to do, of course. 22nd of April, had a meeting with Phil and Victoria looking at the last vestiges of our input to the Secretary of State Public Appointments recruitment campaign, and also finalising arrangements for the subsequent conference forum of UK National Parks chairs and chief execs, which was held here in Bakewell. I'll say about that in a few moments. And on the 24th of April, both Phil and I attended the 60th anniversary celebrations of the creation of the Pennine Way in Hawes in the Yorkshire Dales National Park. There was a number of our rangers there, and it was quite interesting to see the gathering of people who had worked as our rangers in the national park, who had gone on to different organisations in Scotland, in other national parks and elsewhere, but were coming together again as part of that celebration. And although we left in the early afternoon, I think they were going to be celebrating into the evening. I don't know how many headache pills were consumed the next day. On the Secretary of State appointments element has gone live. The advert is out. The closing date is quite soon. There is a brochure, which you may have seen, which unfortunately erroneously suggests that we have 3 Secretary of State vacancies. That's for the direct appointments. We, of course, only have 2. But on the 28th, the 30th and the 2nd of May, I've had telephone conversations with people who were considering applying. Now, I know from Phil's perspective that he has also had conversations with people, so we're anticipating quite a number of applications for these 2 Secretary of State posts. So it'll be interesting to see, given the calibre of those I spoke to, I'm reasonably confident that we should be getting some good Secretary of State members. Phil has noted in his report that interviews are going to occur, and that's absolutely true. Since he wrote that, I've been contacted by DEFRA's public appointments section asking for dates of availability weeks beginning the 16th, 23rd and 30th of June. So the intention is to hold those interviews either in late June or very early July. I don't believe that appointments will be made in time for our AGM at the end of July, but it does suggest that we should have some replacement or newly appointed Secretary of State members, hopefully August, September time. It depends on how slowly those wheels grind. Yes, on the end of April, 30th of April, it was a very busy end of week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday that week. In the morning, but again, both Phil and I attend and spoke at a meeting of some 20 DEFRA officials at Castleton, at our visitor centre. The majority of the people were those who deal with Access for All initiatives, but there were also FIPL people, that's Farming and Protected Landscapes. And with Sue Smith was able to take people out into and experience accessible Castleton issues. The tramper was used. There was a presentation from the lady who leads Accessible Castleton. And I think the tenor of what, and there was a presentation about the impact of FIPL as well as Access for All. And I think the impact of, I spoke to several people, one particularly who was a data cruncher, and I hope she will forgive me for using that description, but she was really grateful to have got out of the office and away from the computer to be able to see on the ground and hear on the ground what the impact of the otherwise just numbers that she sees really was. And I think that's really important. And I think it's credit both to our organisation for what we achieve on the ground through people like Sue Smith and other colleagues, our rangers and so on, but also credit to DEFRA for enabling their employees to get out and see the impact of what it is they're funding, and so on. And then that afternoon and the Thursday and the Friday was a meeting of the representatives, chairs and chief execs of the 15 UK national parks. There were representatives, either or both chief execs and chairs or deputy chairs from all 15 national parks for, on the Wednesday afternoon, visits to Cresbrook Bridge and to Mamtor. And then Thursday morning was presentations, particularly of things like the AI initiative that members have been introduced to before. I raised that only because that was the one that had the most impact on people, and a lot of people were both complimentary and keen to take away the lessons learned from those presentations. I'm sorry I'm going on, but it is jolly exciting. Then on the Thursday afternoon, we had a visit to Chatsworth, and the sun shone on us because we're so godly, of course. And then Friday morning was an address, again, a series of presentations on national issues, not least the work of the National Parks Partnership branding initiative, which is part of their initiative to enable prospective funders of initiatives in national parks across the country to understand better what it is that we do, to provide the hook and then the bait to draw those people in, to relieve them of their well-earned cash. I think that's all I have to say at this moment. You'll probably be pleased to hear. So I will hand over to Phil. I know he has a couple of, at least one additional, something to add to his report. So Phil.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. I'm actually going to add a few things, actually. Hearing what you've said there, Ken, just a few extra things to add. So we have actually had our Investors in People award confirmed. However, we want to let the staff know first. It's really, an award for mainly our work with staff and volunteers. So we're going to announce that at the all-staff briefing in a week or two's time. The brochure that's mentioned in my report for new members, we've got that produced now, and obviously we've had elections and we're going to have some new members coming from some of our local authorities. So we're going to get that brochure out ASAP so that any newly elected or currently elected councillor can see really what's involved in being on the authority, and it'll help hopefully inform who comes forward. I did want to just mention a Sustainable Hayfield. Big shout out. They had a series of talks, and I went and presented at one this week, and there were 70 people there. So it was a really brilliant engagement, and it was a chance to talk about nature and climate and the work we do here, and a really good discussion afterwards. So that was fantastic to see that many people there. On the Youth Voice and the Youth Impact Collective, we're awaiting the consultant's report on how we take that forward, but we are thinking that we don't have member champions anymore, but some kind of mentor or buddy, or someone or some people from the membership to kind of support that group. We are encouraging them to look at the Secretary of State appointments as well and make any applications that any of them want to do through that. Two final things really, and that they are related, and I want to spare Sue Smith's blushes, who is at the back of the room, but we did have the... we had the Paul Hamblin Award, the first ever Paul Hamblin Award here recently. Now, Paul Hamblin was absolutely fundamental in creating National Parks England. I never met him. He tragically died very young, a couple of years ago, but he gave his whole self to national parks and the causes, and a number of staff did work with Paul, and some members might have. And to honour Paul, the family have created an award. We presented that here because we had all the UK parks here, and the winner of that award was Sue for amazing, access work. And we filmed Tony Gates, the chief exec of Northumberland, talking about Paul And if you want to be kind of inspired about a genuine, amazing person that Paul was, then that video clip is going to be up there. And also David Butterworth from the Yorkshire Dales National Park, who nominated Sue, he gives the award to Sue as well. So that's a really good little clip. We'll get that done. But also this week, I went to Horseshoe Quarry to look at a FIPL-funded access project. So this is a quarry that's a former quarry. It's now owned by the British Mountaineering Council, and it's a really steep set of cliffs, or I call them cliffs, I don't know what they're really called, but climbers, very, very popular with climbers. And through FIPL funding and partnership working, we've smoothed the path out now, we've put accessible gates in, and I met a couple of climbers there, one in a wheelchair, a young man from Sheffield, cerebral palsy, wheelchair user, and he just said, I'm stuck in this chair all day, and I only really feel alive when I can climb. And that's what our work does. Small little things, and our team of countryside maintenance people delivered the work. Sue delivered, the access funding. The FIPL team delivered that, and you should all be proud, really, of the life-changing difference that we are making here for people. So that's just what I wanted to conclude my report on.
Okay, thank you, Phil. The only comment I would add is to the final sentence of paragraph 224 in Phil's report, that he thought he was in good company with me, as he hasn't walked the entire length of the Pennine Way. I can confirm he was in good company. I haven't either. So, well done, that man. Okay, if there are any... Janet Dugdale.
Yes, of course, there's always me, isn't there?
Indeed.
Thank you both for your reports. There's an awful lot going on, and Ken, it seems your diary seems busier than ever as chair. It's fantastic that all this is going on, but I think on behalf, I hope I can speak for members by saying we're very lucky that you have the time and commitment to be doing all this, because it does sound like a full-time job to me at the moment. But what comes out of that question is actually, are we getting traction here with DEFRA, with the MPs and so on and so forth? Phil, I noticed there's been several MP meetings taking place. You mentioned John Pearson, John Whitby, and there's various agenda items. Are they listening? Are they understanding? Are they seeing our point of view? Because we're spending a lot of time. Are we getting traction with DEFRA, with the MPs, with decision makers?
From my perspective, and thank you for the kind comments, I wasn't fishing for them. From my perspective, one of the most useful things of that DEFRA visit on the Wednesday morning was the opportunity to talk informally to people who do have positions of influence, to rehearse where we are, to reiterate what the impacts of decision making are on the National Park and the National Park Authority. I feel that it's a drip process. It's a longer term process. There is never going to be an immediate, from our perspective, positive response, but the opportunities that it presents to be able to keep on, if you like, at one level nagging, at another informing, is invaluable. Phil, I don't know if you have...
I'd put the MPs, the local MPs and DEFRA in different categories, really. So the local MPs, there's a lot of new MPs, and they're learning about the National Park, and we're getting really good engagement and traction and behind-the-scenes support. So what an MP, particularly now, a Labour MP, the kind of discussions they have in the division lobby and so on with people, in ministerial roles can be really useful for us. So the more we do engage and talk about our issues and show them stuff, the better. And I think, that's generally seen to be quite positive relationships at the moment. So that's good. With the DEFRA, it's brilliant. It's brilliant that lots of officials keep coming here and seeing the work we do. And I think we have really good relationships and traction at a certain level, within DEFRA. But we have a new ministerial team, and we have the most senior officials also quite new to national parks. So it's really important that we do keep, engaging. The minister's getting around, visiting national parks and learning a lot. I think we have a really important job to do over the next few months collectively to make the case for how the comprehensive spending review gets settled. So that review will conclude fairly soon, in June, I think it is, and then the departments will be allocated their money, and then the departments have to then go through their business planning and allocate their money, and that's where we'll get our 3-year funding decision. So there's absolutely everything to play for in terms of making our case to the officials and the ministers around that allocation. And I don't think in this park we could be doing much more to make that case and showcase what we offer and the value that we offer. And if you just think about the grant that we get, which is now down, unfortunately, to about 6.1 million, our turnover, Sinead will correct me, but it's in the sort of early 20s of million. Now, we can only bring in all that extra funding and resource because we've got that core amount that's, keeping the lights on and providing the office space and so on. So the case we have to make is really strong. Unfortunately, everyone else is making strong cases for what they do, and the amount of money is, declining. So we just have to keep going. That's the really important decision for us. We're still living this year with a roughly 9% cut. And it's going to be key what happens in the years ahead.
But I think the thing I would add to Phil's comments is that our attendance and input, such as it is, to National Parks England is really important, not least because it enables Jane Butler, the Chief Exec of NPE, to make those collective representations to government. Government doesn't want individual representations from each individual national park. It wants to speak to one person. And our attendance and attendance by others at those meetings is crucial to both form and guide the ways in which Jane represents us. And then with National Parks Partnership, they are doing sterling work, warming up potential sponsors as the emphasis begins to be more and more on income generation. And I suspect we could be looking at reductions in National Park grant while income generation net requirements increase. So that again is vital, to be able to put input to both the trajectories that those developments take, but also the tools like the branding element that enables NPP to make best representation on our behalf. Ginny, then James, if I may, because Ginny did raise beforehand, Jim.
Thank you,
James.
Chairman. Well, first of all, I wanted to acknowledge the AI mapping and the fact that they actually have recognised the good value work that we're doing here, because in my connection with the local nature recovery team, I can see the value of the AI mapping, so it's good that we've got £500,000 secured for that.
And that comes up in the subsequent paper as well, yeah.
But reading the Chief Exec's report, I'm reading between the lines, or maybe not even between the lines, that we're getting the message from DEFRA that they want us to be more commercially self-funding, and they would be prepared to put some money behind us actually doing more self-funding initiatives. And I just wondered if that was something that we've taken on board. Is it a reality? Is it something we could be working on?
Phil?
Or are?
Well, that message is, definitely loud and clear from government. They're looking for national parks to be creative, entrepreneurial, more commercial. We're going to need some kind of legislation change around our power of competencies to enable some of that, and that's apparently being progressed. We were also given some extra capital funding this year, to be spent this year, and the idea is that funding can help with nature recovery or income generation, future income generation. And we're certainly looking at what opportunities we've got to use that capital to help secure our ongoing kind of revenue. However, it's not that much. What we'd like is a longer term commitment. We'd like more capital coming and it to be committed over a longer period of time, so we're not forced into having to spend it within 1 year. So that again is part of that funding settlement, that 3-year settlement is, what are we going to get for capital? How can that how can we be freed up to use that in ways that do reduce our dependency on a core grant that, in all likelihood, the mood music is going to be continuing to go down.
Okay. James.
I think
James
it's an important point that Janet raises about traction, but I don't think whatever endeavours our chair and our chief exec make is going to change the government's approach to national park funding, with the greatest respect. What it does do is show that we're a trusted partner, and that's why we get FIPL money. That's why we get the observatory money. And I think it's at that level that we can be confident that this money, that this endeavour that we're putting into trying to get traction works. I don't want to be depressive, but at a national level, things will happen out with our control. But it's a very good track record in the monies that we receive through things like the observatory. So it's time well invested, in my view.
Thank you, James. We were scheduled 15 minutes to this point. We've taken over 25, so I suggest we move on to items for decision. But just ahead of that, I'm proposing that we move agenda item 11 to after item 8 because of the interlinkage between Tourism Charter and the Active Travel Plan. I hope that doesn't disappoint members who are obviously doubtless keen to get into the internal audit and external audit informations. Oh, yes, I do beg your pardon. I've just been reminded, members, we have to note the Chief Exec's report, so can I have a mover for that, please? James, thank you. Ken, seconded. All those in favour of noting? Thank you, members. That's unanimous. Thank you, Phil. So, my previous comments notwithstanding, we move on to agenda item 8, the Tourism Charter. Phil, any update that you wish to make?
No, we've been here a few times before, so the charter's there now. It got reworked after the forum discussion, and the recommendation there to adopt the charter, but that will then really trigger the real work, which is going out and getting people signed up to it, and the action plan around dealing with the issues. We know the issues are very real. Great evidence from the evidence team now on use of the national park. So keen to get this charter adopted, possibly tweak the wording if necessary, but get it adopted. Let's get out there, use it, sign people up, and start, or carry on taking forward that kind of area management work around some of these real visitor pressures.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Members, any comments? Matt, then Martin, and right, then Andy, then Patrick.
It was a question about the report that was done last year by National Parks England on regenerative tourism in UK national parks, which doesn't appear to be referenced in this. Was that a consideration in the way that this is done? Are we making sure that because that report has quite a different sort of feel and emphasis to it to the Tourism Charter, which is very much feels much more restrictive than the regenerative tourism thing that National Parks England did.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't quite see it like that, Matt. I think from my reading of the regenerative tourism stuff, which is brilliant, it's great. So regenerative tourism is about, you don't just have kind of no impact, you have a positive impact. You don't actually have a negative impact. You do things while you're a tourist that really positively make a difference, be that, volunteering or activities or staying in businesses that are doing that. So fully support all of that. It's just our tourism charter, I feel, has a slightly different emphasis. It's about managing visitor pressure. It's not about the kind of the sustainability or positive impact of tourist businesses. We would obviously, we've got nothing. I've personally got nothing against what's in the regenerative tourism piece that national parks have done collectively, but I do see it as being a relatively small impact. Because you really need to be a really regenerative tourist. You probably need to be doing more than a 2-hour or 3-hour visit into the national park, which is where a lot of our pressure comes from. So I think they actually complement each other, but they're different, would be my take.
Okay. Thank you, Phil. Martin Byrne.
Right. Are we going to get parishes involved in because they are the people who are actually on the ground and actually know where the advantages are as well as the disadvantages?
Yeah, happy to take the charter and get parishes signed up to it as well. It's a good idea.
Right, good.
To the
That's what I wanted.
Parishes Forum? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Martin. Andy Nash.
I welcome the charter and especially the feedback from Ken and Phil on the engagement with MPs and other bodies externally about how we might raise the profile of the park. I wonder if, I don't know what the next steps are after this. It's a bit difficult to put this into some kind of context. But about 8 weeks ago, all the district councillors for the Hope Valley wrote to the two MPs asking them to pull together a summit for the Peak Park to talk about the impacts of tourism, and Phil might be able to give us an update on where that is. I haven't had any feedback from either of those MPs yet. But I wonder if perhaps the first step for us should be to pull together a summit and get these discussions going and get people to sign up to the charter there, because if we do it the other way round, this could go on a long time. And I think if I had to go and explain this to one of my residents or one of the residents of the Peak Park, it does feel a bit like pushing the can down the road a bit.
Okay, well, I think it's a start, okay? It's a start, it's a marker, isn't it? It's a charter setting out our intention. The next steps, as James has always said, you know, it's the next steps that are really important, what we do with it. I'm happy to take this charter to every meeting I go to. There are a number of meetings about visitor pressures. That's one of them. Brian's actively involved in very similar meetings already that are going on with stakeholders, landowners, partners, and so on. And I think we just take the charter if it's adopted and sign everyone up for it. And I think that summit is one of many activities, and it's a good opportunity to promote it. But I do think we will need our own kind of separate kind of group, if you like, or meeting to take the management plan partners, because basically we want the management plan partners signed up to it, and others as well, and then do that detailed action planning. So that's going to need, you know, setting up in the near future.
I think as well, if I may add to what, from my perspective, this is but part of the approach to dealing with tourism impacts. It's that top-down approach. And I think engagement with the parishes, as Martin has suggested, is more of a bottom-up approach. But we've also got to develop our own, as Phil has just said, our own approaches to that bottom-up approach to be able to engage with our communities and individual people. So it's not the silver bullet, and it's not the be-all and end-all. It's just part of the initiatives. If you've come back, just...
I think that's brilliant, and perhaps at the next meeting we could have an outline of what the plan would look like, because I think that's really important to deliver it. If we haven't got a plan that we can all see and sign up and support, because we're out there all the time as envoys of the park.
Of course.
We need to be contributing to that.
Sure, okay.
I won't commit to the next meeting, okay, but in the future meeting, because it will take a bit of time, and, you know, the next meeting's July, you know, early July, so if that's all right, we will bring back an update on how we're getting on with it.
Yeah, okay. Patrick, then James, then Bill. Patrick
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm supportive in principle of this. I've been saying once or twice to Brian Taylor recently that we need to, as an organisation, look at the way we advocate things and the way we present the cases we're trying to make. If you're charged with something in a court and you're given a choice between Patrick Brady or Lord Birkenhead defending you, you go for Lord Birkenhead. We might both make the same arguments, we might both make the same points, but he will get the argument over and get you to understand it. What worries me slightly about this is it starts off quite well with the introduction and makes some very good points. But then when you get onto the actual list of bullet points in the charter, they are prosaic, they civil servantish. There's language there that is very uninspiring. And it's difficult to work your way through those and get a feeling that this is going to be the way forward and this is what we would like to do. You know, I mean, you've got a phrase like coordinating consistent multi-channeled visitor communications. The first bullet point will do some research. I know research is important, but research is a background thing. There needs to be... You're going to have to try and sell this to, amongst other things, 2 key partners who have just completely changed their political control, and try and catch their imagination and try and catch their support for what you're trying to do. And I don't see this as it's phrased. I'm not arguing about the content. I'm arguing about the presentation of it as being something that's going to actually inspire them to pick it up and say, yes, we'll do something about it. They might put a tick in the box and say, yeah, we'll do it. But it'll get no further unless there's some really important messages coming over in a very clear way. And I'm sorry, I just don't think those bullet points have quite got a grip on it. Even if I'm wrong, which I'm perfectly happy to accept, I do think there should be a very clear statement in here that in formulating tourism policy of one sort or another, the point complained at in paragraph 3 above is addressed. In other words, we should be taking on board the impact on nature, on cultural heritage, on local communities, the impact of what we are doing, as well as doing all of these other things. That should be a key factor in the way we deliver this charter. And that is, it's sort of in there, as it's worded, that there's a sort of, we'll ask for some money to manage visitor pressure, but that's a bit vague. And then the reference to reducing negative impacts is limited only to the key locations. It's not about the impact across the board at all. It's only about looking at key locations. I think that just needs more work to get the message over. You know, if we've just been through an appalling 6 weeks of elections and looking at the election manifestos that have gone through our letterboxes, none of them would have used words like that. I wouldn't have voted for most of them anyway, but you know, we need to get better at making our arguments, and I just don't think this is quite doing it.
Okay, Phil, do you want, and then go to James?
Yeah, thank you, Patrick, for those observations. I guess I don't disagree with you, but the role of this charter is to sign as many people up and reach as many people, and there are many competing and contradictory drivers with tourism. So there are those who want more tourism within the legitimately, and there are those who want less. And this, if we want it to have a lot of impact, it's been written in a way, as the management plan is, so that people can sign up to it. I could write a political pamphlet on tourism that would be much more hard-hitting, but much more kind of single-focused, but that wouldn't be as successful in getting a broader range of people engaged. So that's the kind of balance we've got to tread. I think the work will come in the action plan and how punchy we are and how ambitious we are with our actions. But to start with, the feeling has been, get a document that a lot of people can sign up, acknowledges the problem, acknowledges we want to work together on a solution. But that all of that said, I'm still happy to look at all your points about language and presentation and impact, but I do want to retain a document that kind of broadly covers the issues and that as many people as possible feel they can sign up to.
I think as well, if I may, the document won't exist in isolation. There will be an introductory communication about it, which can go some way to explaining some of the points that have been made. While that's not ideal, I think this is the second time this document has come to this committee, and I just feel that we need to move on, which is why it's here now. Patrick's points notwithstanding. But thank you, nevertheless, and thank you, Phil. Bill Handling.
As colleagues know, I'm very concerned about the impact on tourism on local communities, but I'm also very much committed to making the national park as accessible to people as possible. And just by way of a bit of background, I come from a sort of urban working class background, and despite that, I walked, when I was in the sixth form, my first introduction to the Peak District was when I walked the Pennine Way without really knowing much what I was letting myself in for, and my dad certainly didn't know what I was doing either, but you know, I did that. And in those days, and I think this is important, and I won't dwell on it too long, you know, I learned from youth hostel wardens, people running bed and breakfast. I had one of the early copies of Wainwright with me. The Pennine Way hadn't been opened that long, and so I learnt my way. It was very small scale. There weren't many people around. Tourism wasn't very big. And in the same way that when I first started climbing, you could often meet people on the crag that you knew, you know, it was quite a small thing. Now that whole tourism thing, it expanded greatly, which I welcome. You know, I've not got a problem with that. I think what the role of the park now is not to advertise the park. I think people know about the park. Social media is a big driver of that, but we need to look at the other purposes of the authority, which is about education and about passing on good practice in the way that used to happen on a very small scale. You know, youth hostel warden would say, you know, do this, do that, remember to close gate, or whatever, country code. So at the moment, you can enter the national park and leave the national park without knowing either it's a national park or what the sort of principles are about the landscape and respecting it, and how you can contribute and work with the local communities and other visitors to make it better for everyone. And I think that's, I've been thinking quite a lot about this, and I think that should form, in terms of a charter, that should form a centrepiece, this role of education, this role of, it's a contract, isn't it, between local communities, the landscape, the national park, providers and people coming in. We're entering into a contract where everyone respects each other, and the ultimate outcome is a better place for everyone. And I think that I would like to see that as a sort of centrepiece, really, or a very strong part. I know it's sort of mentioned, but I think that's the key point now. And I think if we can drive that forward, I think you know, that's the sort of message we need to do. We need to go for.
Thank you, Bill. Phil, do you want to make any response?
Well, only in that I'm not clear whether we're asking for a revision of what's being presented here, or whether, you know, members would be comfortable in me writing some kind of introduction to the charter that can pick up some of these points and do it that way. I mean, we risk not passing the charter and bringing it back and then kind of delaying getting on with this. So I think that they're really good points, Bill, and I don't disagree with them. So I don't know how members want to proceed with that.
Can I suggest, picking up on the point you made in your introduction, Phil, that there may be room for tweaking some of the words just to reflect some of the comments that members have made. We could include a second recommendation, which Angela has timely produced, which would be that the authority be delegated to the Chief Exec in consultation with the Chair of the authority to review the presentation of the document as agreed. So it gives us the opportunity to agree the document. We can do a little bit of tweaking. We don't lose the thrust of the direction of travel of the existing, but we take on board some of the comments. That's one option that perhaps bear in mind, because I know that James has some comments that he wishes to make as well. James, Beresford.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, we've just got to get on with it, actually. You know, we've seen this paper 2 or 3 times now. It is what it is. I'd like it to say different things. Everybody would like it to say different things. But it's not our charter. This is our position on the charter. The charter will work when it's a partnership charter. And I can promise you, once we've had our first discussion with the partners at a summit or whatever you want to have, this will change. This will change so that it is acceptable to the others. There will be people who look at this and say, no way. People that run tourism businesses, for example, they won't want to have anything to do with this, believe me. Some will, some won't. Some might adopt regenerative tourism. Regenerative tourism is an initiative that might sit within this. So my firm recommendation is take it as it is. It will change. We've got to get on with it. The most important thing is actually getting an action plan behind this, because nothing will change without an action plan. One of the things, and two of the things that I think are really actually very important in here that might be hidden, one is the area management approach, which has to work with parish councils. That has to work with parish councils, the people who are seeing things happening on the ground. And the other, although it is in some slightly mythical language about multi-channel, this, that and the other, it's about how we actually discuss this part of the world. You know, it's day visitors who are coming from, which is fine, but we've got to stop promoting the area, actually. As Bill has said, we've got to stop doing this. The colour will emerge when this is a genuine charter which is signed up by our partners. It will do. And I would just say, right, okay, a few tweaks. I know Ruth's made a couple of suggestions, a few tweaks, get on with it, get it out, move quickly. If we don't move quickly, there's a reference in Phil's paper early on about a destination management approach that the mayor is challenging, and that's happening now. This has to influence that. And, you know, with the greatest will in the world, the mayor might not have additional monies to put behind tourism. But what we don't want to do is not have our voice heard, which is as a collective through this, to influence the mayoral destination management plan. So my plea is accept what Andrew has said as an additional tweak, but let's get on with it.
Okay, I'll take that as a recommendation, James. Certainly, that's my feeling, that it's time to move on. We can argue about the order of words and the content forever, but as James has said, I think we do need to move on. And we have, I suggest, that second recommendation gives us a bit of flexibility to tweak, to take on board some of the comments that have been made. So James has recommended, has moved the recommendation, I would suggest. Do I have a seconder? Charles, thank you very much. Charles Greaves. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. That's moved then, members. We'll now move on to what was agenda item 11, the active travel plan. I think Brian Taylor is going to come up. And Tim Nicholson. Okay. Yep. Oops. Well, there's two chairs there. Right. So is it you, Brian? Or?
Yeah.
So you're going to, you have a few words to say over and above the report.
Yeah. Okay. So good morning, and it's just a quick introduction from me because I want to pass on to Sue Smith and Tim Nicholson, who have led on this project. It's been a year project using Active Travel England money that's been given to all English national parks to produce an active travel plan for our areas. So we've done something quite unique in our context. And I brought some information on this subject to the Members' Forum in March and explained the consultation process to that point and our intention to bring a final plan to the members for adoption, including our proposed routes, which will form what we're calling a high-level strategic network for active travel. It's just a little correction, I think, at paragraph 2.6 of the report. It should the words in bold should include the word cycling as well, but it's just... So the normal approach of highways authorities is to produce cycling and walking investment plans. That's quite a common plan that those bodies are making. And we've been given the chance to create our own, but we've decided to add in wheeling and horse riding into that as well because of the very unique access opportunities that we have as well. So officers have now reached this stage. We've spent the last year consulting and producing a plan. We've got a plan on the table now. And this is the last opportunity within the funding period that we've got to bring this to the members, which is why it's today, to complete the plan and then demonstrate that we've met the key objective, key output for Active Travel England. So we recommend that the plan be adopted, including that high-level network that Sue and Tim will explain and show you in a little while. But we also request delegated authority to make some final changes prior to publication. There's been quite a rush to get the plan to this point, so we recognise that there's some tweaks we need to make. But also importantly, that we've had feedback from Active Travel England as well, their leads. And they've commended the plan, commended the work, which is great to hear. But they also feel that there's some strengthening and sharpening up as well. So we feel the delegation will just give us that space to do that. We're also suggesting in the final recommendation that we could keep bringing progress reports and updates back to the authority to let you know how we're getting on with not just it being a plan on the shelf, but where that goes in future and how we use the plan as an evidence base to go for further funding and to make these little improvements that keep working towards that plan. So on that basis, the recommendations are to adopt the plan in front of you, delegate authority to make final changes and keep bringing the plan back with progress. And I'd just like to draw in Tim and Sue to illustrate the plan in more depth and show you some of the detail behind it. That's okay.
Thanks for that, Brian. It's good news that Active Travel England are happy with the plan, albeit inevitably with some comments. But Tim, Sue, whoever's going to lead. Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so you hopefully may be aware that we produced a wider Peak District cycling strategy back in 2015 to build on the success of the Pedal Peak District and Pedal Peak 2 projects. And the strategy was developed with a wide range of stakeholders, including highway authorities and other stakeholders. However, in 2017, the way in which active travel schemes were funded changed with the publication of the Department for Transport Cycling and Walking Investment Strategy document. And this focused on access to funding and delivery being solely with highway authorities, but in partnership. And this would be through the development of local cycling and walking infrastructure plans, or LC WIPs as they're generally known. Now, these plans can vary in size. They can cover a large area, so the Ribble area is covered by the whole, their local authority area is a whole local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. But in most cases, they form specific areas, they're urban areas that they cover. All of our constituent highway authorities have an LC WIP, but only one of them, the D2N2 one, covers any part of the national park. So when we got them funding from Active Travel England, it was partly as a result of the recognition that LC WIPs don't really cover national parks. And so we were offered the chance to develop these plans, and we received £100,000 from Active Travel England, as did all of the English National Park authorities, in order to produce an LC WIP. Because of the tight timescales, we focused on a strategic high-level network, and we included wheeling and horse riding as well as walking and cycling, as Brian mentioned. Given our complicated geopolitical makeup, our initial focus was on stakeholder engagement. So over the summer and early autumn, we had 2 workshops with highway authorities, 1 workshop with landowners and 1 workshop with local access forum. And the main focus, as can be seen on the slide, was mapping the network. We gave them OS maps and got them to draw on them. And what we wanted to see was what exists and what stakeholders would like to see in addition. If I could hand over to Sue now.
Okay, so we've mentioned the high-level network plan, and what we did with this network, it looked to connect main areas of population and key visitor attractions. This is because we were saying the routes for leisure were crucially important within national parks, as well as for the shorter utility journeys. The routes that we identified on this network included former rail trails, Sustrans, routes, those previously identified in the Peak District cycle strategy, and those as part of Derbyshire's key cycle network, because Derbyshire County Council had started to develop plans for active travel in the national park. As Tim mentioned, we have 7 constituent highway authorities in the national park. We also mapped as well routes up to 10 kilometres beyond the national park boundary, and that's to show connectivity to and around the national park. 2 types of route. The existing was shown as solid lines, the proposed routes were dashed lines, and they were indicative only. So that one. Yeah. That's good. Okay, so a public consultation. So as we followed on from all these stakeholder workshops and the involvement with that, we identified the network. We went out to consult on that network. So it was, there was a press release, posters, social media. We consulted all the parishes. Another figure for you there, so 5.5 thousand views of the actual consultation, 830 views of the interactive map and video guide, and just another stat for you is that there were 47,000 views on social media. So a press release, as I mentioned, went out, and that was picked up by 100 media outlets. When we consulted on the network, we also asked for details of where people were coming from, how often they visit or would visit if routes were improved, and the type of activity. And we felt this was important for us to understand and prioritise what is needed for the everyday journeys or the longer recreational routes. We used interactive mapping. It was the first time we'd used interactive mapping, and that allowed locational pins to be placed, but it also allowed people to provide comments, more general comments as well. And here's an example of the interactive mapping. I've decided to just give screenshots in here rather than to have a go at the interactive mapping, but it allows us to interrogate it, add a lot of data to it. The consultation responses in total identified need, challenges and concerns, and these are set out in the pages to the back of the draft plan circulated with the report. They picked up on active travel in practice, the network as a whole, and individual locations and routes. So there were nearly 400 individual submissions. The majority showed the importance of routes for repeat visits and by those living in or adjoining the national park. As you can see, 89% were within 10 kilometres of the national park boundary. This showed the important locations, so it recorded the variety of activity types. So we talked about the wheeling side of things, so clarification, the wheeling picks up on the inclusive cycling, pushchair, wheelchair. We also picked up on running as well, important particularly for the utility journeys. We were hearing from people that running to work. Running on the school run, literally. But cycling and walking accounted for about 2/3 of the use, and daily, weekly and monthly visits accounted for about 80% of all visits. In terms of the improvement locations, so the majority of responses were for providing a new route or for improvements to an existing route. A number of road crossings were also included. And this is the beauty of interactive mapping, because it allows us to really zoom in to see the detail, to see precise locations. So rather than someone just having to do their best at providing descriptions, we can actually see on there where people have placed pins. And this map is our finalised network. So it shows the importance within the national park of the local traffic-free trails and for adjoining routes around the national park. Using these key routes as a means of connecting further. So they're our main routes and ambitions. This is what we mean by high-level network. Any secondary network development would allow further community connectivity as well, but is subject to the availability of further funding. As part of the consultation, there's detailed route analysis which will be undertaken using the consultation responses and the other data we have been gathering, such as via people counters, such as the visitor surveys, such as Strava data, and that's going to be undertaken with the involvement of the Local Access Forum, where we set up an active travel subgroup. So that's the Local Access Forum and other key users to feed into that and to inform the development of this work. And final one, so that's there without to just show the difference. So following consultation, we amended the network along the Derwent Valley route to follow minor roads where available, and in other locations where public rights of way are followed, it's important to note that braiding of routes may be an option. So wherever possible, we will look for multi-user routes, but there might be some occasions where we look at braiding routes. This can be for a variety of different reasons. It might be in terms of gradients, it might be, for example, by way of suitability for the majority of users. Now, the proposed routes may follow roads, tracks, public rights of way, or other infrastructure features. So remember, the proposed routes are the dashed lines. The map line is indicative. It shows a general intention only for connectivity. The development of a proposed route is subject to detailed design and feasibility. It's with consultation and will be with funding. Other work is also underway in the area by Derbyshire County Council for its master plan, so that includes one that's currently underway for the Hope Valley. And as well as developing the network plan, other capability building elements, which has been funded by the Active Travel England Fund, include data and evidence, an economic business case, audits and feasibility and design. And I'd also just add here that work and the work on making this network and active travel more engaging, so people have the information they need and feel inspired to change even just part of their journey to a more active means of travel.
Thanks, Sue. Just touch on the Monsell Trail. Everyone will know about it and its importance. It's our premier multi-user route. The Peddle Peak District project in 2010, we got near enough £3 million funding from Cycling England, and the project reopened 4 closed tunnels and improved access to deliver an 8.5 mile multi-user route. So the two photos just show before and after at Great Longston, where there was no easily accessible route from the road down to the station, and we put a ramp in as part of that. As a result of this project, there was a 300% increase in cyclists after opening, so if you compare the weekend before opening and the weekend after. But what our counters show is that the vast majority of people using this route are walkers. So as part of the research behind the study that we've done, the project that we've been running, we did some trail user surveys. I think the important thing to pick up off this slide is the amount of visitor spend that we're seeing. So the surveys took place at Millersdale, Parsley and Torside, and I asked people to complete questionnaires. But the amount of spend, particularly on the day out for Millersdale, is particularly impressive. So those who spent were spending on average close on £70 per person. And what we also found out at this particular location, unusually 20% of the respondents were staying visitors. So all of that information has been kind of useful for us to try and put together an economic business case. So working with the Orchard Dales National Park Authority, we've jointly commissioned Phil Jones Associates to carry out an economic business case assessment. For the Peak District, this will assess the economic value of the existing strategic network, so the solid lines on the map, but also the additional value of the proposed extended network. Work's ongoing, it's due to end this month, but the table shows the transport use and benefits of the existing Monsell Trail to be 1.3 million pounds per annum on 2010 prices, and the proposed White Peak Loop extension would offer additional benefits of between 1.5 and 2.8 million pounds per year at 2010 prices. The economic business case will cover the whole of our strategic high-level network within the national park, so we will find out a bit more from that. This slide just shows some of the assumptions that were used, and they're largely based on existing user counts and predictions for low or high uptake as a result of additional infrastructure. Finally, we've been looking at some feasibility work, things that we'd like to take forward. One of the programs that I'm particularly keen to see if we can do something with is the Transpennine Trail. There's 3 crossings of the Transpennine Trail across the A628, which makes it really difficult. It can be 5 minutes at least trying to cross the road there. What we'd like to do is, with National Highways and other partners, is see if we can come up with a better solution, but a solution that's suitable within a national park. And the second one of these is Swainsley Tunnel with the manifold track. It's great to ride through, but it's also a Top Gear kind of destination for a lot of drivers, hence the sign. There's an antisocial driving behaviour order there, section 59.1, in trying to persuade people to drive safely. It's used by walkers and cyclists, horse riders. We'd like to potentially find something that will make it work better. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks, Sue and Brian. Members, comments or questions? Bill, and then Martin.
Yeah, just a brief comment. I mean, I urge us or you to be brave about creating some routes and links, especially where they go through environmentally sensitive areas. My experience of, for instance, in the Netherlands, which has got a very dense cycle network, is a lot of those routes go through very valuable dune, forest or heathland landscapes, but they serve to protect them. People don't leave the routes, they walk along the routes, they ride on bikes or horses along. So, you know, I'm not saying that's appropriate everywhere, but I firmly believe, you know, that is a brave thing to do, but it's also a good thing to do for public access and enjoyment of the countryside without actually damaging the surrounding environment. That's just a thought.
Thanks, Bill. Martin Burr.
Right. I joined this through joining the Local Access Forum, and recognise the amount of work which has gone into producing the output for this. Area that we do need to think about if we're going to reduce car traffic is provision of public transport, and that's either by extending routes so that they come to public transport hubs, or redefining some of the local the public transport capabilities. Over Easter, I was in Torbay, and one of the key things which was there was that the bus service, which runs right through the main places that people want to get to. During the day, it runs every 12 minutes, and it was being very well used. We need to think about how we deal with this, so that we encourage people to get out, leave their cars, and go and see what is available. At the moment, many of the trails sort of start and stop, effectively in the middle of nowhere.
Thank you, Martin. Any comments that you wish to make, Tim or Sue?
Thanks, Martin. It's a valid point, and amongst the things that we've been trying to do with working with all of our constituent highway transport authorities is to see where we can potentially extend out of the national park, so that we're both looking at a route that will serve connections in, And whilst this won't serve everybody, there is the potential, particularly with e-bikes, to extend the range that people can travel in. But we're also, we're aware that there are difficulties with access to public transport generally, but particularly getting some of these links in. As you will probably be aware, in the past we've looked at cycle shuttle buses, and that's something again we could, certainly we'd like to encourage some of the bus providers to carry bikes and the trains to provide bikes, but also for walking and wheeling. Generally, getting that accessibility, you're spot on. We definitely want to do that.
Thank you, Tim. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just add that the National Park cycle hire facilities being located on the trails provide the opportunity for people to leave their car and to try a more active form of travel. So it's how we develop that further, and using the Access for All funding, we have been funding inclusive cycling there and other means of mobility as well.
Thanks, Sue. Can you put that? Patrick Grady.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry, I've been away for a week and I've had some difficulty trying to catch up with some of these papers. And I'm not quite understanding what I'm reading at the moment. The Appendix 1 starts off with Section 7. Mm-hmm. So there's a rest of a document somewhere, is there?
Mm-hmm. As far as I'm aware.
Yes, Patrick. The whole of the document is accessed via a link on the report. So sections 1 through to 6 are separate.
My attempts to get links on reports have not been successful this last week, so I wouldn't have been able to do anything with that. What I'm trying to get to grips with is what we are being asked to approve in terms of pushing this forward. It seems to be in paragraph 213, when it's about continuing work. But it says, for example, that when it comes to the financial corporate implications, it just says we have to do something by a certain date. Are we being asked to approve something that we are going to do, or are we simply being asked to approve something to enable you to chat to other people about what they're going to do? I'm a bit confused about what we're being asked to do at the moment.
Can I ask Brian to respond?
So Active Travel England gave us money to produce...
Sorry?
Active Travel England gave the English National Park authorities the money to produce the plan.
Yeah.
So we're agreeing the plan today, and it includes, what we are saying would like to be our high-level active travel network, and that includes some of the routes that are already in place, but with some indicative routes that will complete that whole network. But that creates work to be done, and some of that is completing the White Peak Loop, for instance.
But that's for somebody else to do, not for us to do.
Yes,
That's for somebody else to do.
We're creating an ambition for this national park, but obviously that goes beyond any one individual highway authority area. So the advantage of us doing it is that it's more coordinated and connected for the whole national park, which any one highway authority wouldn't be able to do.
Mm.
So, for example, when it shows a dotted line going up on the map, going up the Derwent Valley, somebody has a route in mind for that, do they?
Yeah, we think that's an important north-south connection to get between two areas of current trail.
I understand that bit, but is there actually a route you'll say it's going
There's
to...
an indicative route, and the question will be, does that end up being the road through Chatsworth Park, or does it be, another path, potentially alongside the River Derwent? But that has landowner implications, which we've consulted on. But the value is actually that people are saying that would be a great connection to make our active travel work.
And is that for us to do or for the county council to do?
Thanks, Patrick. The route, the Derwent Valley Cycleway, is part of Derbyshire County Council's Key Cycle Network.
Okay.
And it's actually been promoted by someone who doesn't work for the County Council, who's been working on this for a number of years. So it's unlikely that we will be looking to deliver it ourselves, but because it's part of the Derbyshire Key Cycle Network and has been consulted on,
right,
part
okay.
of their feedback meant that we included their network within ours.
Mm. So from my perspective, Patrick, this is akin to the Tourism Charter, which is why we moved it up the agenda. It's looking to provide an overarching framework of our ambitions, working with partners who have either projects underway or may be able to adopt projects that we might propose in order to implement an improved active travel plan, active travel through the national park. And this is the start, this is the overarching document that will give us the wherewithal, if approved by members, to pursue those objectives. Yeah.
Okay, can I then move on? That's fine as far as it goes. First of all, I agree with Bill's point that if you have an effective footpath system, it is one way of protecting nature from the adverse impacts of too many people, and that I certainly support and encourage. I was a little bit concerned to see in here, I think it was under Green Lanes, it was, that we're talking about making use of existing pedestrian routes for cycle routes. I mean, the conflict between cycles and pedestrians on some of these ways is bad. It's easy on the Monsell Trail because it's wide. It is a lot less easy on the High Peak Trail, for example, and on other trails it's very, very difficult. And I would have certainly liked to have seen something in here about the importance of recognising the priority of walkers and the need to reconcile those two uses, because I think that is incredibly important. And I'd have liked to have seen something in here about the importance of having regard to nature recovery, because some routes would damage nature recovery, others may not, others may enhance it. But I would like to see that is taken into consideration in the process of developing these routes. And I would like to have seen something in here to say that we would take into account the impact upon local communities of looking at these routes and what they did. Okay?
Yep, thank you. I'm sure those points will be taken into account. Yep, that's the whole purpose of this. There's others ahead of you, Bill.
Very briefly,
Others ahead of you.
the links didn't work for me either. So
Did they not?
So we perhaps need to. That'll be useful to have links to work.
Perhaps that might be one of the updates, but it would have been useful to know that beforehand.
I've got to be honest, I haven't actually tried them. We initially put the full report in.
Right, so it's the hot links within the report that don't work. Is that the right? Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Mandy Martin.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for the presentation. That really helped to bring the paper to life. So thank you to Tim and Sue. And I'm also pleased this got moved up to alongside the Tourism Charter, because I see a very strong link around, especially the financial benefits, being the sell of getting partners to sign up to the Tourism Charter. So it'd be good to see in Phil's action plan for the Tourism Charter that link to bring that together.
Yeah, that sounds a cogent comment. Thank you. Matt Buckler.
Yeah, it's sort of following up on Martin's point, actually. I cycle here fairly regularly from Matlock, and connecting in the White Peak Loop. And I'm just saying this from the experience that I've got, rather than I don't know what the routes are like in from Buxton, but the fact that I think that it provides us a real opportunity to look at reducing the impact of traffic on cars coming into the national park. If we think about the links, and obviously you have done that, but so for example, at Matlock Station, Derbyshire Dales District Council own a building, which you just look at it and think this would be an ideal cycle hire centre for to get, which would, rather than being within the national park, so people have to drive to it. Why aren't we looking at ways of running cycle hire centres from places outside the national park to enable people to get into it Do you know what I mean? Because everybody who goes to Parsley Hay has had to drive to Parsley Hay or cycle
Indeed.
to it. Whereas, you know, Matlock Station, it's at Matlock Station. You know, you can be on a train you can get there from London in 2 hours, and you know, it provides a really good opportunity. So it's really thinking about the links to outside the national park.
Thanks, Matt. Any comments you wish to make quickly?
I'd agree with you, Matt. If we can get cycle hire at some of the locations that are close to our boundary, then that'd be really useful, whether it's something that we as an organisation can do or whether we'd look for partners to do it. But it would be a useful solution.
Thank you, Tim. James Beresford.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad Mandy raised the issue of connectivity with the Tourism Charter, and a lot of the things that Matt and Martin have said relate to the Sustainable Travel Network paper that we have, and we've already agreed. So my plea is connectivity. It's mentioned in here that there is relevance and reference to the Sustainable Transport Plan, but that talks about access to the park, it talks about bike buses, it talks about all of those things. This is a manifestation of some of the activity that would emanate from that plan, and I'd like it to be seen as that, not just as a standalone, but actually part of our plan. And I think that's really very important. It also links to the Tourism Charter. There's data in here which I hope is cross-referenced to the work that we do for tourism data. Well, however, £68 head per spend, sort of seems a lot to me, and I wonder if that's per family or per person. So, you know, there is connectivity here, there's thinking in here, there's brilliant advancements in what you've done. I commend it. But please, as an authority, we need to look at this as part of a whole. It sits within the tourism work, and it sits within the Sustainable Travel Plan. So that sort of thinking has to be adopted in future.
Yeah, thank you, James.
Thank
Certainly my note to myself at the top of the document was relationship with Tourism Charter, ? So, yeah, one to watch. Charles Greaves and then Simon.
Thank you, yeah. And yeah, really happy with the paper, really supportive of it. I've just got two comments regarding the Quiet Lanes piece on page 71, and that's from my personal experience of Quiet Lanes. So there's the yin and the yang to it, shall we say. There are quiet lanes in the country that are national speed limit at 60 miles an hour, which seems to be peculiar, shall we say. I would suggest that if you are looking to designate for quiet lanes, that alongside the quiet lane status, you look at reducing the speed limit to 20 miles an hour, which is much more in line with the shared space nature of a quiet lane. And the two don't automatically run together. And obviously, you want it to be a proper speed order so that it can be enforceable. But the Swainsley Tunnel perhaps is halfway there. It's got the 20. I've been through that actually, yeah. And I think actually we drove through that bit of it and then walked the other bit. But the other issue with quiet lanes though is perhaps how they're misunderstood sometimes by local residents. So again, the important bit about the quiet lane is it's a shared space. It's not a prohibition on through traffic. And unfortunately, in my village where we've got one, we have a few residents who live on that quiet lane who believe that it's for residents only and act accordingly. And it isn't. And I think it's that bit about just making it clear what a quiet lane is and what it isn't. It's about sharing it. And so the 20 helps support that, but equally, part of it is because perhaps some of the rhetoric that was put out to residents about why the quiet lane was introduced in my village, which was as a traffic calming measure, which it's really not. But also about it identifies that actually there are limitations on that route. So as soon as you do that, the obvious question then is well, now you've accepted that this is a problem route, what are you going to do about the route? And quite often there isn't that much that can be done with it. So that's part of the reason why quiet lanes haven't really taken off around the country, although they've been around for quite a while. So yes, they can help, but actually in some respects the 20 designation is the more important bit. But where you do put them in, I think it's really important that people understand it's a shared space. It's not a prohibition on traffic. It's not a prohibition on visitors or through traffic. It's just about making sure that's understood.
Thanks, Charles. I'm sure that'll be taken on board. Yep. Simon Thompson.
Yeah, so very much welcome the report. It's a good piece of work. I think my concern is that focusing in on this strategic network at a time of constrained resources just means that even less will be spent on the rest of the network, which is falling into increasing state of disrepair, both public rights of way, but also, of course, roads where potholes are a nuisance for traffic, but they're actually very dangerous for cyclists, which we're trying to encourage. And one of the quiet lanes that you draw attention to here, I use as I cycle to this meeting in Cronsbury Bridge. The road has completely collapsed in that quiet lane after the flooding 3 years ago and hasn't been repaired. And if you're familiar with it, of course you slow down, but it's a pretty steep hill. If you were not familiar with it, you could certainly damage your bike and possibly yourself. And that's true all over the district. So I worry that this plan is going to focus our partners' limited budget on this network rather than supporting the broader network where we get more concentration of people in particular areas with potentially adverse impacts. So I think we should emphasise the importance of maintaining the broader network. The second point is I am slightly surprised that the residents of Bakewell and pupils at Lady Manners School can't find their way to the Monster Trail, and I struggle to believe that should be our top priority.
Yes, I noted that. Thank you, Simon. Any response that you wish to make? I mean, particularly Simon's point about the poor state of roads and resource availability.
I think in terms of the resource availability, I would expect any money that would be spent on any of the routes specifically to come from Active Travel England rather than from the Highway Authority's road maintenance budget. So the two shouldn't conflict.
I suspect it wouldn't.
I still think it would be worth making the point to Active Travel that just focusing on one or two routes is not the solution to encouraging broader active travel by the local community as well as visitors.
It might even be moving that around so that the product of the plan, if you like, the outcomes, would be dependent on Active Travel England's continuing support rather than anticipating it coming from a local authority budget. Ken Rustage.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Yeah, I mean, excuse me, could I also welcome this plan, this document? A number of points, really, the signs, I think these are really welcome. I was reading this about the Yulegrave Quiet Lane to Lathgoldale. But I think the key to this is safety for visitors and local residents. And I also welcome the routes beyond the national park, again with safety, the cycle paths and the paths for walkers. I was just wondering, that was someone just alluded to the fact there could be a danger with the cycles and this. People looked at, if you look around the country, there is sometimes like a gap or even painted just down in Darleydale, they've painted it, so that's for cycles, so that's that. If you look at a bigger place down the East Lancs Road, when it was first built before the war, it was 2 cycle paths, but now they've done the same thing to mark it. If you look in some of the towns. And also, some of this to mitigate against the danger and environmental damage. I think that's something else. I mean, particularly you think of the danger crossing the Woodhead Pass, I wondered about sort of bridges and tunnels. If you go down to the A6 in Darleydale, years ago, when they must have built the A6, I guess, before the motorways, there is a little tunnel under there if you ever go on the other side with the pub on one side. But again, obviously, with all these ideas, there are cost implications. I mean, the only thing is, you get more visitors. If come back to the original thesis, you've got to raise more money. But I think safety, and we don't want to, safety for residents and the visitors, and we don't want to exacerbate already damage. I don't know what you can do with that. Just build the paths up and things like that more. I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Ken, and thanks members for the range and quality of commentary. We have a set of recommendations before us. Can I have someone move that recommendation? Ken Rustage, Matt Buckler seconded. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. It's 11:30. I propose a 10-minute personal needs break, so reconvene at 20 to 12. Thank you very much. Crikey, we're out of sync with this now. Okay. Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
That's your one, that's not rejected.
Yeah, yeah.
Taking it back to
Yeah, just so as I know. Good to go. Okay, members, thank you for returning. It's always nice to see familiar faces. And we now go back up the agenda to the original item number 9, the internal audit plan. Sinead, there's nothing to add from your perspective. So, members, it's as we've noted in the report, Stuart Cutts is with us for any detailed questions or any questions that Sinead wants to pass on to him. So, any questions or comments? Janet Dugdale.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the report, Sinead. It's really probably for my benefit of understanding. It says the internal audit plan of work's been prepared on the basis of a risk assessment. This isn't the same as the risk register that's in the corporate strategy. So how does this risk assessment come about in terms of deciding what the priorities are? And secondly, there's an awful lot on the work programme this year. So are there priorities within it?
On.
It was, yeah, Tom.
So I suppose the risk assessment spans from conversations that myself and Stuart have all year and against my judgment as CFO in areas that I want to delve into. I suppose we see it as a kind of added supplementary personal, like people on the team that we actually don't have the time to delve into everything because we're such a small team. So areas that I feel need a deeper dive, we'll discuss in detail with Stuart, look at what other national parks are looking at and look at there's a cycle as well of areas that we need to look at an internal audit. So we'll kind of look at that as a whole. Some of it will be cyclical, some of it will be areas that I think I'd like somebody kind of third party looking at that because I'm not quite in as deep in the detail as we have time to be as an authority, and areas that I just feel like people need to be kind of on their toes a little bit as well.
Okay, and the prioritisation, the workload prioritisation?
Yeah, so we do normally prioritise. So there's 35 days allocated, and what myself and Stuart will do, we'll sit down once we're finalising. We normally do it over 2 phases, but we're actually going to do it over 3 phases this time, just so that we constantly have audits going on rather than a lot of them kind of come up at year end, and it's just not ideal for me to be looking at internal audit and year end at the same time. So we're going to come up with a better plan for next year, and there will be areas there that we will focus on, like the contract procedural rules and the car parking, which is obviously that is an area we want to look at because we're investing a lot of capital into it this year. We're hoping to get a lot of revenue return from it, and we have our enforcement that's just gone live in the last couple of months. So that again, we want to make sure all the controls around that are working, and all the legal compliance, reputational risk for the authority. So them ones will be priority, and we'll look at allocating the days based on priority, and then we're re-looking at like rent reviews and leases because there was so many findings that came out of that last year, but that would be low priority, and that might only have 2 days assigned to it.
Okay. Simon Thompson.
Yeah, so I have similar questions to Janet, really, just trying to understand how you identify the key risks. Do you liaise with the external accountants and make sure that the areas you're going to focus on, the internal audit's going to focus on, are complementary? Because there's not much overlap with the key risks identified by the external auditors. And then second question, did you give consideration to asking internal audit to look at reserves appropriation given the problems that we've had in that area?
So reserve appropriation, Simon, has been on 24-25 audit. We're just completing that at the moment. So you will get that report in July.
Right, but no, the question was whether internal audit...
That was internal
It is
audit.
internal audit.
Yeah,
Okay,
internal
thank you.
audit. They've just finished looking at that area.
Thank you.
So I have the closing meeting next week on that area. The other question...
Just...
Oh, yes, so external audit. So what we do is we look at findings that external audit come up with on their control risk on their end of year report, and there was only one real one that stood out there, which was the issues, the HR employment contracts, and that's on this year's audit as well.
Yeah, but the key risks that they identified...
You're on.
I am. Management override, valuation of land and buildings and so on. There's nothing in the internal audit plan that actually addresses those. Well, I guess it falls into contract procedure rules tangentially, but not directly.
Yeah, I don't feel that would add any value, because the issues we have with the valuations can't really be fixed in terms of how our Warslow estate was originally valued. The internal audit are not going to be able to add any value, so I will only direct them to areas that I feel they can add value.
And management override?
Just...
Hello, so I might be able to assist on just the, because it touches on external audit. So management override of controls, that's a mandatory risk on all audits, whether they're companies, councils, and it's an international standards on auditing. So it's not something that we have particularly found that's lacking at the authority. So I just want to clarify that point if it's helpful.
Okay. Okay, so any other comments or questions? In which case we have a recommendation before us. Can I have someone to move that? Janet, Douglas, thank you. And Andy Nash seconded. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That's been adopted. We move on to agenda item 10 in that case, external audit. Just frantically trying to find the right paper. Here we go. Sinead, no further comments? Okay. In that case, members, any additional comments on external audit? Janet Dugdale.
Yeah, sorry, me again. I've got a couple of questions for the auditors. The first is, Mazars, I think you've been our auditors for some time now. And I note the first task is to understand our organisation. I'm just wondering, given you've been our auditors for some time, how much time are you taking to understand our organisation? And do we get a fee discount because you must understand our organisation by now in some detail? We must have less time allocated to us than if we were a new client. And secondly, do you audit any other national parks, and do we get any sort of economies of scale from you auditing other national parks?
Nice try, Janet. I like your style. Jenny. I should have said Jenny Norman from Mazars is with us to answer precisely these kinds of questions.
Thank you. So first question was on how much, if we are able, we have a nice acronym in external audit called CAKE, which is Cumulative Audit Knowledge and Experience. So we will definitely use that to inform. We have to update our understanding of of the authority, which will change each year. There'll be updates, so we're always looking at minutes. We're having ongoing discussions with officers. But you're completely right that we have a good foundation, having audited the authority for several years. So in the Midlands, we don't have any other national park authorities because there's only one. But we do have Loch Lomond. We do have various others, and we are a national public sector team. So we're always sharing knowledge. Hopefully that answers your question. Thank you.
Apart from the impact on the costs. Yeah. But we'll forgive you, Jenny. Okay. Ken Rustage.
Yeah, I mean, just one point at B, the financial cost. They said of the audit service contract, 23-24 being a 150% increase, and the forecasted cost at 10% each year. But it does seem a lot. I know inflation has been going up, but is there any reason for this increase of 150%?
I think it's imposed upon us rather than... But Jenny, do you want to comment?
This is last year, as you mentioned, so we did touch on this a little bit in the last meeting that we came to, but there was an exceptional backlog in local government audit, which built up principally from 2019 onwards. It started to worsen, and it reached its peak in the 23-24 year. The government brought in extraordinary measures to clear that backlog. Peak District was thankfully not affected because Peak District was actually up to date, but there were hundreds and hundreds of councils up and down the country which had their accounts disclaimed. So it was part of this extraordinary situation, an investment in audit. But yes, as I always say, we do not set those fees. But that, I hope that goes some way to explaining why they were so much higher that year.
So I guess it was the previous government who said you've got to do it, and that's it.
I couldn't possibly comment, Ken. But I'm not disagreeing with him. Okay, any other comments or questions? Mandy Martin.
Just another question on the fees, if I may. So it does mention the 10% increase year on year. I just wanted to clarify that 51k seems 5k less than last year. Is that right? Rather than an increase? On page 55, it looks to be less for the new tax year versus the old one.
Yeah, it looks like that on the paper, but actually that's the scale fee. When the audit is finished, we then get a supplementary fee based on if there's any new accounting standards they need to audit. For example, we have a new accounting standard been implemented this year, so we generally see between 5 and 10,000 of additional fees after that amount that you're looking at there, the 51k, which can sometimes come in 2 years later.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. So in terms of those additional accounting standards, I noted that there's no cap on the potential fees for that. Do you expect that to come in within that 10%? Or?
I hope so. We have accounted for it in our year-end accounts. We put it up to £10,000 of additional fees, because that's the kind of general trend we're seeing. Last year we had a new system implemented, so that would have caused additional fees because they have to audit the new system implementation. So it just varies year on year what the additional standards or kind of big business change that the business is going through. So you can never put an actual number on it, but looking at the trends over the last 4 years, it's generally around an extra 10,000 a year.
Okay. Tough from a budgeting point of view.
Everything is.
Yeah. And then just from a curiosity point of view, the pension scheme I see is quite high risk given the financial liability of that. Is that open to new joiners in the same guise, the final salary pension scheme?
Not final salary. So the pension scheme is still open, but the pension scheme will have changed a lot over the years. So some people will be on older pension schemes than new joiners starting today.
So that financial risk mix will change.
It changes every year. I've just got the pension reports through today, so I haven't even had a chance to look at them yet. But yeah, every year it can swing by 10 to 15 million a year.
Yeah, it's traditional. It just goes up and down.
It's just one of those things you see on a financial statement, and depending how the pension scheme is constructed, the risk factor gets higher and higher, and again with budget constraints.
Oh, indeed.
There is it's called a triennial review that will be happening this year. So it will be looked at in detail to make sure that the provisions we're putting away on a monthly basis are sufficient, and that could have a budget impact if we're not putting enough away. So that is something that will be looked at later on this year by Derbyshire County Council, who look after our pension.
Thanks, Sinead. Are there any further comments or questions? If not, there's a recommendation before us. Can I have someone move? Charles Greaves, thank you. Seconded. Ginny, thank you. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, and thanks to Stuart and Jenny for attending and responding. We move on now to agenda item 12, establishing Resources Committee and minor additions to Planning Committee. Thanks, Sinead. Are you taking this item or is it? Right, you're taking this one? Okay, right. Yeah, okay, so you present and... Yeah. Okay, so thank you, members. Agenda item 12 in that case. Emily, any additions that you used to make? In which case, members, the report's before you. Chris O'Leary.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, first of all, a minor issue, but on page 83.5D, I'm assuming in the first sentence it should say unsound decisions rather than sound decisions. My more substantive question is, I've not seen in public sector organisations finance and audit being combined in a single committee. Normally they're very separate. And I understand that best practice is to do that, partly because the role of audit is to provide assurance that the financial management system is working. In my own local authority, you cannot be a member of both committees, and there has to be a year between your being on one committee and on another. And I'm really struggling to understand how, if I was a member of this committee, I would be able to do the audit responsibility and the financial committee responsibility. So I'd like some more detail on how that's going to work, if it's considered best practice, SIPFA, if it's compliant with SIPFA rules, and also what the auditors might think about this change. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Emily, Angela? Someone has to respond.
So I can advise that the matters that are required by law, so for example approval of the budget, the capital programme, they are specifically reserved to the full authority, and that is in the terms of reference that is for approval, that is in the appendices. So those are specifically reserved to the full membership, and the role of this committee is to scrutinise those finances.
I'm sorry, I intended to go to Janet as well first. So does that help, Chris?
I understand that role is reserved to the full authority. That's typical in local government. However, the Resources Committee, as I understand it, will have a responsibility for managing that budget in between meetings of the full authority, and may make recommendations to the full authority about rules around financial management, rules around treasury management, etc., etc. That sounds like a very different function to me to an audit function. And I just need some clarity on how those two functions are going to work in the same committee with members doing both things.
So if it helps, what we've got at the moment is that we've got our Programmes and Resources Committee, and then we've got separate a group of members that isn't a committee that does audit and budget and the project risks as well. So the only key difference really is that we're pulling that group of members into a committee process so that it's all full and open and transparent. So there's no difference in terms of what overall we're asking members to do. It's exactly the same. It's just putting it into a different system of working. And in terms of the kind of difference between the proposed Resources Committee and the Authority Committee is that Resources Committee would scrutinise before, so that we can have a smaller group of members really getting under the skin of whether it's our audits, both internal and external, or whether it's how we're getting on with the current year's budget monitoring. So that if there's anything that's significantly material in terms of budget monitoring, that can be escalated up to authority, the same as at the moment our audit, budget and project risk group does. So it's exactly the same functions, just put in a different way of working, which will hopefully be much easier for members. So for example, earlier today, you've had that full detail around the audits at authority, whereas the proposal is that to make it more streamlined and efficient, that only half of our members look at that in the Resources Committee, and then they can make those recommendations to full authority, so it helps even the balance between all of the committees.
I think this is it's fundamental to the recommendations. I just wonder whether either Stuart or Jenny, hearing what has been said, as auditors, albeit internal and external, whether you have an opinion from our officer perspective. There isn't a risk or there isn't a problem. Chris's experience is somewhat different to what we're having proposed to us. Is there anything from your perspective that raises alarm?
Thank you, Chair. I would want to reserve judgment because I would just want to check and look into that guidance further. I think the SIPFA guidance from 2022 would be the guidance I would want to just freshen my memory upon. More recently, because there's a new SIPFA internal audit code, that's where my brain is more focused on, and I'm meeting Sinead later on this month to discuss those matters. So I just want to I wouldn't want to be on the record giving a definitive response without doing my homework first.
Yeah.
So it might have been something that was considered by officers as part of pulling the recommendation together. What is the content of that SIPFA code? And they may be able to provide a slightly more helpful or informed answer than I've just given.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Does that response have any implications of what you have said so far?
We were just having a think.
Well, while you're having a think, Mike and then Janet, Mike Chaplin.
Thank you, Chair. I hope I've got the right end of the stick here, but I just wondered if Chris's authority operates to a cabinet model. No. Yours is committee. Yeah, because we don't. Yeah, in Sheffield we don't. Although we've got an audit committee, I don't think you have to not be on other committees in order to be on it. Whereas the setup was different when Sheffield had a cabinet model up until about 4 years ago.
Okay.
But my query though was on the resources hearing subcommittee, which is basically there to investigate member standards, as I understand, if I've got that right. And I just wondered why we'd come up with that name rather than call it a standards or a member standards committee.
There wasn't really any reason for the name. I just thought it just made sense to say it was a hearing subcommittee, because that is what the only remit of it is that if a hearing is required to look at an investigation in relation to a code of conduct complaint. The importance is that it's a subcommittee that's created to do that, and it's got its own terms of reference. The name isn't really. We just came up with that name. We thought it made sense.
Okay.
It just seems to be very ambiguous, or was that the intention? To bury rather than to shed light.
Janet,
yeah, thank you. Can I sort of take us back to the bigger picture here? I've been chair of Programmes and Resources Committee for 3 years and vice chair of it for 2 years before that. I also chair the governance working group that's worked with the officers to come up with this proposal. What we were looking at with this, in terms of the context of these recommendations and these amendments, was looking at ensuring that we have better member scrutiny of key areas, but also we're not wasting everybody's time by having more meetings than we need to, both officers and members. But also the programmes element of the Programmes and Resources Committee, we're finding, as it's aligned to the 4 management plan aims, and we'll be talking about the management plan in the next item, you'll see that they're very aligned. And the items that have been coming on the programmes side for Programmes and Resources have felt like they're things that all members should know about, not just a subset of members. So the governance working group worked with officers to come up with these set of proposals where we're putting a more coherent set of scope into the Resources Committee of resources. We also know that there's a lot of items that come to full committee authorities, such as scrutiny of external audit and as Chris says, the finance papers that are already considered by the full authority. The Resources Committee is a subset of that full authority. And so in terms of bifurcation of responsibilities between finance and audit, we don't have it at the moment in the current setup, and this doesn't change that situation. But what it does change is that we will have a more a larger group of people with scrutinising the finance and audit elements as well as other elements before bringing a recommendation to be approved by full authority. So it's what we're proposing in terms of that separation of finance and audit we don't have at the moment anyway, because we have a duplication of members between resources, programmes and resources and full authority. They're not separate anyway at the moment, so this isn't changing that.
Thank you, Janet, for that clarification. I've got Patrick and then Ken Richardson.
Chairman, I think Charles has raised a valid point, but I think it's one that can wait. We know that some of these arrangements are going to have to be kept under review by the governance working group. If we have the wrong answer back from our auditors, we can look at it then. And I'm happy to move this report as it is and bring anything back if there are problems, because there will be other issues in the delegation arrangements which we're going to have to address, and we can deal with them at a future date.
Yep,
so I'm happy to move it.
Thank you, Patrick. I was going to suggest that we considered approving the recommendations subject to clarification from our Angela and Emily, because if necessary we could have an extraordinary meeting ahead of the members' tour, for example. I mean, one of the reasons why, as I think has been explained, the reason it's been brought to this authority is to incorporate the outcomes into the AGM at the end of July, and I'm loath to lose that opportunity. So if members were, as you have moved the recommendation, if members were willing to consider that subject to, we would have to have another element to the recommendation, subject to...
Yeah, so it'd be... So we could have an additional sentence at the beginning of the recommendation, so subject to the proposal being in compliance with the SIPFA code and guidance, SIPFA codes and guidance, and then the recommendations remain as is. If members are, that we could have that as an amended recommendation. Go on.
I don't want to argue with the lawyer, Chairman, but if you put it in that form, the whole thing becomes conditional. I think if you approve the delegation scheme on the basis that it will be available for amendment at a later date, it would be rather safer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
If members are happy to do that.
Yep. Ken Richardson, then Charles Greaves.
Yes, just a quick point of clarification. I head up the audit committee. I don't serve on the resource committee. I serve on planning committee. So that's a simple way around. Planning people, us on planning committee, serve on audit committee. We report to resources committee, job done.
Thank you, Ken. That's cutting through the Gordian knot, as ever. Charles Green.
Yeah, I think maybe there's the issue here is about different governance structures. So on a political authority where you move away from that cabinet structure, you'll normally have a coordinating policy committee. And on the looks of it, at Cheshire, their finance committee is a subcommittee of that policy committee. So that would be their equivalent of the directing councillors. Their audit committee then is totally separate from that. That would be more akin to their reviewing councillors. So that's I suppose you would have within a cabinet-led system is you wouldn't have any members of cabinet who would be on scrutiny, for example. So I think it's a case of that there's a number of different systems, and depending upon which system you've got, then depends upon what committees and subcommittees you've got and who can and can't sit on either. What we've got is different because we're not on really a politically led body, and I would perhaps say that. Those division of responsibilities, actually they all meet in full council, in full authority. So the day-to-day operations are covered by the committees, but the major aspects are covered in full. So there isn't that division that you get.
Okay.
And I think that's the distinction in Cheshire East.
Okay. Thanks, Charles.
And can I add, I fully support the proposal.
Does that mean you seconded?
Yeah,
you have to second it. Okay. So in that case, members, the recommendations have been moved and seconded. I think we should run with that and vote on that, with in the knowledge that the background information that Chris has raised, it will be looked at by Angela and Emily, and if there is a problem at all, then we will be informed in due course. So if that's comfortable with those who've moved and seconded, then members, all those in favour, any against, any abstentions? Thank you, members. That's moved that item on. In which case, we can now move on to agenda item 13, member training and development 2025-26. And who's dealing with that? It's Emily, isn't it? Yes, of course. You have nothing to add. That's even better. Any comments or questions, members? Patrick and then Simon.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Somebody who's been totally untrained looking at this agenda, apart from the planning function, my eyes caught hold of something which I thought I'd better look at. The list of suggested new member induction topics is absolutely fine. I've not done any of them myself. It's the sort of thing that you would expect to happen. What rather caught my attention was the note underneath, which was that members will not be able to participate at committee if they don't go through these things first. And I thought, well, what on earth is that about? Because I've not seen that before. The first thought I had is that if we have a rule like that, that rule ought to be the subject of an authority resolution, and it's not included in the recommendation that's before us. And then I thought, hold on a moment, if the Secretary of State appoints a new Secretary of State member, the Secretary of State will expect that member to be able to take part in full debates in committees and things from the moment when that member is appointed. And I was wondering on what basis it was that we suddenly said to them, hold on a moment, we don't care, Secretary of State, what you've appointed. We're going to make sure you go through all of these things first. And between them, they're going to take up quite a lot of time, aren't there? There are 5 subject matters there that are all quite meaty and will take up quite a lot of time. And for it to have to get through all of that in a short period of time before you can take part in committee meetings is quite considerable. And then I sort of thought about it a bit further, and I suddenly realised that what the report is saying is that you cannot take part in committee meetings until you've been through these items, but you can apparently take part in full authority meetings. So you can vote on budgets, and you can vote on important policy documents, and you can do this and you can do that at full authority meetings, but for some reason or other you can't do it at a committee meeting, and that just doesn't seem to make sense. And whilst I'm happy with the programme of suggested things, I'm just wondering where this idea that you can't take place in meetings until you've been through all of those things. I mean, I'm not sure, for example, why a planning committee member who's done the planning training is prevented from appearing at the planning committee and taking part in a discussion on a planning application because he hasn't taken on board the finance, budgets and internal and external audit issues. It doesn't make sense. And I don't know why we're approaching it from that sort of angle.
Well, as far as I'm aware, the requirement that members should undergo undertake the planning training before participating has been in place for a number of years. We've all been through
The planning one has.
Yeah.
The planning one has. It's the other ones I'm taking up issue with.
Sure. Oh, I see. I thought you were grumbling about.
No, I'm sorry. I should have made that clear.
Yeah,
the planning one is right because there's a very logical reason for it, and the logical reason relates to the importance of addressing the right issues when addressing a planning application.
Well, I assume that the other topics are to meet the issues that you've raised, like introduction to authority policy and strategy, finance and audit introduction.
But why can you take part in a full meeting of the authority, but you can't take place in a committee? You can make a decision on a major issue, but you can't consider a health and safety report or a report on. Well, we've got a report on the next planning committee on performance and that sort of thing.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense, and it's unduly restrictive.
Sorry, Janet. Yep. Janet Dale.
Yeah, Patrick, I think you've taken the word committee. I think they probably mean authority and committees. They've used committee as an abbreviation of that, but it should be all authority. It should be authority and committee meetings. But in terms of new members coming in, I struggle to accept that a new member could come in and actually meaningfully vote and participate without understanding the role of the authority or its code of conduct or the procedures or what the local plan is in terms of what it means and what the management plan. I don't see how you could actually be a meaningful member without having gone through these things. I agree people could come and sit and attend, but certainly not vote on these matters. It just beggars belief that somebody wouldn't do this. And I mean, I joined 6 years ago, and these were conversations with officers, and actually they didn't take up a huge amount of my time. And when people are coming in blocks or groups, it might be a morning of somebody's time or a whole day of somebody's time, but it's absolutely essential to ensure we get good decision making. Without it, we could have all sorts of spurious conversations happening in this room, which I don't think are helpful.
Well, sorry, can I come back on that to absolutely clarify it?
Before that, Patrick, I think it's important that we hear what Emily has to say.
Thanks, Chair. So while you've been discussing other things, I've just tracked back to check where that wording comes from. And members have already approved that basis at the 26th of July 2024 authority, where you've agreed the overall member training and development framework, and it's part of that. That wording has then been taken through into the appendix that's in front of you today. So in the framework, it's been agreed, and we're just highlighting that within the existing appendix that's in front of you today to make it open and transparent that actually we need to ensure that we are following best practice and that we're making robust decisions at all committees, so whether that's authority, planning and resources.
Well, Chairman, can I come back to that? Can I give you an example? In 2 years' time, there will be parish elections. You will not have the outcome of the parish elections until virtually the end of June, because that's the way the thing goes. What you're in danger of doing here is saying to the 6 new parish members that come then that they can't vote at the annual meeting of the authority. I'm sorry, I just don't think that's acceptable. I think we need to review this.
Well,
we have a situation within the bounds of this authority of 2 new authorities, almost 100% of whom come from outside local government, Derbyshire and Staffordshire councils. They will be meeting in the next week to make all sorts of decisions without having to go through all of this prior training. I'm not saying the training is wrong. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. I'm not saying that members shouldn't be encouraged to do it. I'm saying that for us to be saying to them, you cannot do your job, which you're entitled to do, for until you have been through all of this, is something suspect. And I think we need to review that.
Well, that's as may be, but at the moment, the recommendation is based on previously approved course of action.
Well, it might be, but we're still
Well,
being
it's
asked
not might be, it
well, we're
is.
being asked to approve that now.
No, we've already approved it. What we've been asked to
Well,
do.
Chairman, all
it's
you've
the
approved,
context.
I have actually had the time to check that. Exactly the same resolution last time round. It was a note in the covering body. We have not passed a resolution which says that this is what should happen in future. What we've approved is a planning training document.
Mhm.
That's all we're being asked to approve today.
Mhm.
And I do not believe that that is acceptable or practical.
Fine, that's an opinion expressed. I have Mandy, then James, then Charles, then Ruth.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is going to be helpful or not, but I wanted just to share my experience of joining this authority. So I've been lucky and privileged to be on a programme where I'm getting trained, and this is my first experience being on a committee or an authority. I wouldn't have known what to expect without that training, and the training I received here was half a day of training max to complete the online modules, spend the time with Angela to understand what the roles and responsibilities have been. And I think one of the challenges you're going to be facing as you get new members on, they may not have been on an authority or a board before, and having that grounding and that framework has been really helpful for me to understand how I can contribute and how I can add value and where those boundaries are. So when I read this paper, it made perfect sense to me, the topics that were being mentioned. If I look at my programme, I cover governance, rules of the board, numbers, because that's a key part of it, so having that financial awareness, how to question what your boundaries are, importance of communication and partnerships, and I think this covers that eloquently and very well. So I just wanted to share my experience of joining
Thank you.
this authority.
And I think that context extends, as Patrick has already illustrated. I think only 17 of the current 60 Derbyshire County Council members have previous experience of local government. So that's an awful lot of them, relatively no idea. James.
Chair, I'd like to come back later because it's a point separate to this.
Okay, thank you. Charles Greaves.
Thanks. Yeah, I've got a couple, so I can take them one at a time. Emily, could you just clarify, in what's already been approved, does it refer to authority and committees or just committees? Because it would make sense if it was just committees.
Wouldn't.
You're not on. Patrick, your microphone is still on. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just double checking the wording, so it refers to committee meetings.
Okay. Well, that would be sensible to me. You become a member of the authority and nobody can take that away from you, but you're appointed to a committee. And the committees deal with the detail, don't they? So really you need to be in a position to understand the background before you start making decisions within a committee. I appreciate that some other authorities with lots of new members are going to have a bit of a training issue, so they need to make sure they're fast and on the ball for it. And that brings us then to our point, which is for our new members, obviously where we've got this requirement that they go through all this induction training, the authority needs to make sure that we've got all those ducks in a row so they can go through it quickly, so they can start. And I'd be a bit surprised if we're not doing that. But you know, there might be difficulties for individual new starters in terms of dates and whatnot. But I think it's important that they have that background before they start committee work. So I understand the point that Patrick's making, but I think we just need to be absolutely clear that this isn't about being able to be a member of the authority. This is about being able to be appointed to a committee and make decisions on a committee. And I'm more than happy with that requirement that you have to have undergone your training. I think lots of authorities require you to go through your initial planning training and updates for planning committee, mainly because they're concerned that if you make an ultra-vires decision and if you've got people who aren't really trained on what is or isn't a relevant matter, there's a real risk that somebody could go off-piste, and if that influences a decision, you've got you've got a problem on your hands, haven't you? And if other authorities decide that they don't want to do that, well, that's their choice, as long as they change their regulations. But I would say this: I'm happy with it being a restriction on committees. I'm happy to propose this.
Thank you. Yeah, no. Ruth Swetnam, then James.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to respond to Patrick. I don't know, you said you hadn't done some of this training. Did I get that right? Or you? I've not done any of it. Not done any of it. I mean, that's probably because you've been on the board a long time and are very experienced. But for those of us who've joined more recently, we have done all of this. And I suppose when it's written all down, it looks like a long list. But I came in and had a morning, and then I did the training. And because at the time I was appointed to the planning committee initially, I also did the planning training, which was quite hard, I found, as somebody who'd never been involved in planning. And I invested the time and got on the planning portal. That's because being on the board of a national park is an important job. It's a privilege, but a big responsibility. And I don't expect in any aspect of my professional life to not be skilled and to be trained in what I do. It's just normal. I'm kind of struggling as to why you're worried about it so much. It doesn't take as much time as it might appear in laying it out like that. It is critical that we are trained. Particularly, for myself as a DEFRA appointee, I regard it that I have a national responsibility to make sure I'm trained. I would just expect that to be normal. I mean, many of us have, you were saying about we wouldn't be able to comment on lots of things in the meetings. I don't think that's necessarily true, because much of what we talk about, we would bring experience from our professional lives, things like finance, health and safety. Every business has that. Every job has that. Whereas something like planning is completely specific, and unless you've been involved in it, you would not have any background. So I completely accepted, and still do, that I need to be trained in planning. So although there may be some issues about the wording, and I think Charles's clarification about being a member of the board but being appointed to committees is sort of helpful, I think it's incredibly important we are trained, and I have no problem with it, and it doesn't take that long. And if you're not prepared to do it, you shouldn't be sitting on the board of a national park. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ruth, for those comments. James.
You may wish to draw these points together before my point, but in assumption you don't, I would just say, totally different to the conversation thus far, I love an infographic, and Appendix 2 is a very revealing infographic. I just wonder what we're going to do with it. I mean, we had the audit, and now we know that certain of us are skilled in the army, which is fascinating. But what are we going to do with it? I think the original intention was that we would apply our skills to various aspects of training or application across the authority. Not sure I see any recommendations to what we're actually going to do with the fact that we've got 10 folks who are skilled in governance. So it might be quite helpful, actually, not to have just done it and said, that's a great audit, what are we going to do with it? And I would assume we want to update it in future when we get new members.
Thank you, James. Indeed. I mean, that was going to be one of my comments, that given that we're going to have a potentially quite significant change in representation from local authorities, that we ought to be looking to repeat that skills audit, not least because only just over half of members completed it in the first place. But that's one to watch for, I think. I think we've had a lengthy debate about the content of the training programme and the wise. Well, that's what I was going. That's a bit I forgot to say. I think that we need to review it. We need to go back, review membership after the July AGM, and then do that audit, and then come forward with proposals as to quite what is going to be done with it. In the meantime, I think we are sufficiently close to the AGM. It would be premature to come up with a set of actions that may change depending on the skill base that we have after the AGM.
If we don't do anything with it, I bet you won't have half the people that applied their attention to filling it in last time filling it again. So let's try and do something with it. if we
It's a
can.
cogent point. Thank you, James. I think on the basis that, I do beg your pardon, Phil, yep. The Chief Executive would like to say something.
Thank you. Just to respond to a few of those comments. Yesterday I was on a call with the East Midlands Councils, which was pretty much all the Chief Execs from the East Midlands, all talking about this number of new people coming in, newly elected councillors. I can tell you they are laser focused on training, induction, codes of conduct, all those things that are necessary before their newly elected members really start making decisions. So I think other people are doing it, and we should. I think I do totally support all of these things being compulsory. I actually think it should be authority as well as committee, because actually we are making important decisions at authority. We've heard about half a day. It's all kind of metered. There's one online training that takes about half an hour on diversity and inclusion. And given the cognitive bias I've witnessed in this room today, I think that's a vital training that all members should have. We did it with the staff recently. All staff have to do it. There is a more in-depth training that's optional for members in Northumberland to go away. Very valuable. You can start your work here before you do that. That will inform you and take you to another level and build you a network. So I would also say that we can adjust the date of future AGMs to tie in with parish elections so that there's enough time to train new parish members as well. That shouldn't be a blocker on what we do here. So I would support making this clear that it's attendance and participation in authority and committee, and I would support what's already actually been agreed, that it is all compulsory before you can take part and get your allowance and make decisions.
Okay. Ken and then Simon.
Yeah,
and then
just a
we'll draw
real
this to a close.
quick one. Thanks for that, Phil. It was mentioned that Northumberland, there was supposed to be that course last year as a person who's just my first year on it, but it got cancelled. Is there any news of when that's going on?
It's going to go ahead.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah. And we'll be canvassing for member attendance after the AGM, correct? Yeah. Simon Thompson?
Yeah, very supportive of Phil's comments. Just on the advisory training and development opportunities which I would like to attend, are those, are you going to set specific dates for those and invite members to join them, or is this just going to be done on an ad hoc basis?
It's usually ad hoc, isn't it? Emily?
Because that would be rather inefficient, I would have thought, to do that on an ad hoc basis. It would take up a lot of staff time.
My intention was to take these forward into the dates that are presented to the AGM so that members can plan them into their diaries as soon as they're available.
Okay. Bill?
Very briefly, I've asked this before and I don't think I've ever had an answer. Our attendances are recorded, and at least 3 times in the last year I haven't been able to make meetings because they were changed. And I made the proposal, which I think is only fair, that where meetings are changed and you don't attend them because you've arranged other things, your programme or work round it, that shouldn't count towards a non-attendance. So you would have, rather than have 9 out of 10, it'd be 9 out of 9. And I've never had a reply on that. I just think that's a fair thing to do, because I noticed, and I'm a bit late on this in the previous item, Appendix 5 has got draft, I think, dates for next year, which I've now written in. But at some point they will become firmed up, and I think that's fair, that then people may not make all of them, but at least you've got a fighting chance to make them, and where they're changed, that's not the fault of a member.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Can that be agreed at some point?
The murmuring in my ear was to the extent that, yes, that precise point about attendance can be taken into account. Angela?
Yes.
Bill? Yeah, it's okay.
Thank you. Yes, we have already, when you mentioned it last time, we had already made a note and agreed that we were going to provide 2 sets of training statistics for members. So a separate set to explain, those meetings that aren't scheduled in, so that it's clear, so that it's exactly clear. So yeah, that's in hand.
And it's my understanding that if these recommendations were approved, then this programme of committee meetings would be set in a tablet not necessarily of stone, but a fairly firm one. Right. I beg your pardon? A digital tablet, indeed. Charles, you moved the recommendation, did you not? So the recommendation has been moved. Do we have a seconder? Janet Dugdale. So can I have a vote in that case? All those in favour of adopting? Any against? One against. Any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you, members. That's been approved. But the comments that have been made have been taken on board, nevertheless. Okay, in that case, if we can move on to agenda item.
Sorry, can we stay on this? Oh, sorry, it's too late now.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, on the subject of computer training that appears in that, would it be possible to have that on a forum agenda for members' training in computer things? I know there is some reservation amongst some members about this, about whether we're getting it in the right way and in the right form. And I think it might be useful just to have a chat about how useful members find this.
Yep. I'd certainly
and
discuss
what's the best way of doing it.
Yep. Discuss it with Chief Exec and with officers and see what we can do. Thank you, Patrick. National Park Management Plan Progress Report, then item 14. It's Sarah. Yeah, Sarah. So any additional comments to the paper? No. In that case, members, you've seen the paper. Any comments or questions of Sarah or Simon? Janet Dugdale.
Yeah, a comment first of all, and then a fairly existential question. My comment is, reading through all of the progress report, and I have read it in full, I just want to commend you all on the phenomenal amount of work that's going on. It's just extraordinary, the range and scale of work that's going on. And I realise this is a partnership plan, but I'm also aware that we as the authority lead on nearly all the items. And so, you know, it's fabulous to see all of that work. My existential question is, there's, you know, going forward, we've got a much reduced engagement team. We've got new administrations in Derbyshire County Council that might affect our net zero plans, and so on and so forth. And then we have sort of random events such as the Goit fire. How are these things? How are we going to manage around all this change and disruption?
Good. It's a thought that has crossed a number of minds. But I would, before get answers, I would certainly support your comment about the progress report. I too have read through it, and I thought it's a really useful way of displaying information. And if members haven't accessed it, I do recommend that you do, because it's full of information about what's done and how, and the outcomes as well as the outputs. But the response to Janet's question, is it Sarah or?
I was just going to say, actually, I think probably Phil or Simon might be slightly better positioned to respond on those points.
Simon?
I mean, very much on our minds, Janet, is that and the changes in the legislative framework around us that I presented to members previously at forums, and I'll do that again this afternoon just to remind everybody. But yeah, there's a lot of change, and the big impacts of fire right up to land use strategies coming into play, the revision of the environment improvement plan as well, and the potential revision of the purposes even this year, which is still on the cards, it seems. So yeah, there's an awful lot of change, and I think that's pointing us towards certainly reviewing how we work both as an authority, which I will pass to Phil on at some point, but how we work through the management plan with our partners and all the partner group. We had a really good partner group meeting a couple of weeks ago, which was excellent, and everyone's aware of all that change and very engaged with that. And I think we've got a bit, I don't want to wait forever, but we've got a bit of time before some other things come into play before we can sort of push the button to think about big change in terms of management planning and stuff. But there's a lot of change going on, and a lot of difference to be made as we go forward, I think.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Simon Thompson.
Yeah, I'd like to invite, I think it's a great report, and it's certainly very user-friendly, very easy to dig into the details. My comment, and I've been struggling with this since joining the authority, is that there's a cognitive dissonance between how we're tracking on the individual action points and whether we're actually going to achieve the higher level objectives and aims. Because understandably, the action points are things within our control, whereas the aims are much higher level. So if you take climate change as an example, we're 80% on course or achieved for the specific action points, and yet we're going to miss the target of a 25% reduction in the 10 years to 2028, and we're going to get, I suspect, nowhere near the 50% reduction that we've signed up to with Race to Net Zero. And I'm not sure what the solution is to that, but I think there's a danger here that we're sort of lulling ourselves into a sense of complacency about the overall achievement of these high-level objectives and aims that we've set ourselves, because all we're doing is tracking the individual actions. And I wondered, and this is just a suggestion for discussion, whether the way to deal with that is actually to put the high-level achievement of the high-level objectives on the risk register. It's not currently there. There's nothing on climate change, failure to meet the climate change target. It's not a headline risk for the authority, and yet I suspect we all recognise that it is. Likewise, reversal of damage to nature and biodiversity by 2028, I suspect is not going to happen. So maybe that should be on the risk register as well. So I'm just putting this forward as a way to try and square the circle. We're tracking well on the things that we can control, and actually we're still going to fail to meet the high-level objectives in many of these categories.
Thank you, Simon. Simon?
I think it's a function of the way that partnership plans have been written in national parks across the protected landscape movement to date. That there are these high-level objectives which come down from government, which we're asked to meet and asked to talk about and asked to think about how we're going to meet them. But what we've got is action on the ground. And marrying those two up, as you say, is a journey of hope or difficulty at the very least. So I think as we go forward, we've talked about and we've brought in the conversation around adaptive management using a features-based approach, which looks at the quality of our features in the landscape, which is quite a different way of management planning. And I think that is definitely where we're going in the future, and that should answer some of those issues, because then, as you say, those higher level sort of governmental objectives actually we can roll down into what we actually do on the ground in a more focused way. So for now, I think I agree with the idea around achieving management plan aims, that kind of stuff in terms of risk register presence. But in the future, I think as we move towards adaptive management, which is a different way of writing a management plan for a national park, which previously it's been about collecting partners together and looking at collective ambition, there's a slightly different, it's a rather different focus on it, if that makes any sense at all.
It does, but I still think in the short term, given that there clearly is a risk that we're not going to deliver those high-level objectives, we should probably record that as a risk. And there's hardly anything more important for the national park than these issues we're talking about of biodiversity and climate change. And it's not on. It simply doesn't appear on the risk register currently, so it's just a suggestion.
I don't disagree with you. I think one of the issues with our risk register, one of the things we've found with our risk register, and I was seeing it's on the audit, internal audit for next year, is that our risk register is a combination of 3 different sets of risks. It's a combination of risks to the place, management plan delivery risks, and organisational risks. And we've talked about that in the team. We've talked about that our management team a fair bit over the last couple of years, how we unravel that, and that's something which we're looking at putting some time into this year to make sure that goes. And I think you're right. I think that those management plan risks, those key delivery risks, do need to be reflected there. I think that's a good comment.
Okay, thanks, Simon, for those comments. Both Simons. Matt Buckler.
Yeah, it's a sort of feed into the point that's been going on there, really. When you look at the management plan and it looks like we're delivering everything, then government are like to say, well, you're delivering everything, you don't need more resources. If you don't have on there, the higher level risks, the two things need to link together, because if you show that we are a competent organisation to deliver the stuff we've got in our management plan, and show that that's still not delivering the objectives or the risks to the authority, then that becomes a reason for people to give us more money, or because we're proving to be a trusted delivery partner. Whereas if we're delivering everything, and then it still doesn't work, then we become less trusted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, by all means, Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. You've spun on the head my thinking, okay, because my fear is our funding is at risk because we're not delivering, not because we are, if you see what I mean. If we kind of have a really honest and open conversation around what we're not delivering on, what we're not able to deliver on, why would government put money into national parks to deliver on these things? Which I think both are true. I think, because our funding is kind of on a knife edge, really. And are we the right place, organisation to put money into? Clearly we are, when you look at what's in here, when you look at all the work we do and the value for money. But it's about making that case, and is that case going to be better made? Is it going to land if we're really honest and open about these risks? Or if we do what most other people do and say, look, we're doing a great job, look at what we are delivering. I think that's a difficult one for us. I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, but I think it's to take away and consider, as Simon has suggested. James Beresford.
I have sympathy with both Matt and Phil. I don't think the management plan and I don't think the authority plan, which is the next item, are necessarily about making the case to government. They're about whether we're performing or not. And at the end of the day, we want the most incisive measures to say whether or not we're performing. If we don't, what is the reason for that? And I think we're there. I think that's where our focus should be. I don't necessarily think it's about making a case to government for funding or less funding. I think it's about, are we doing what we said we would do? Are our partners doing what they said we should do? And to my mind, that's really the most important focus.
Okay, thank you, James. Excuse me. If there are no Charles Greaves.
Thanks, Chair. My question relates to the one marker that's indicated as red, which is the welcoming place, and it's it seems to be the slippage on the Waslow estate plan. So just like a little bit more detail about what the estate plan's going to cover, because this is under the welcoming place head, and it says because there's gap in staff resources, but it's going to be addressed in this year. So have those staff resources now been addressed to be able to do that?
I think you might have jumped forward onto the authority plan.
Are you? Yes.
Possibly.
Are you on item 15, Charles?
Yeah.
No, that's okay.
Yeah. So there is actually one red item on the National Park Management Plan which sits underneath the welcoming place, which I think you began with. This is the action under WP10, which is Underserved Communities Enjoyment Indicator.
Oh, right, so it's not two separate.
And again, there's notes in there just in terms of things haven't progressed quite as well as we would have wanted, but that's largely down to things that are happening at Natural England and with the changes with the PL-TOF. So there's a note in there about we'll be reviewing that going forward.
But you can reserve the rest of your question till the next item, okay? On that basis, members, we have recommendation before us. Do I have anyone to move the recommendation? Ken Rustich, thank you. Any seconder? Janet Dugdale, thank you. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. We can move on to item 15 now, which is the progress report, Decile 4. Simon, do you have any additional? Oh, sorry, Sarah. I do beg your pardon, Sarah. Do you have any additional comments?
Just one addition. We were hoping to get the Chief Exec's update summary to be added by today's meeting. We've not managed to do that, so that will be added following the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Members, any comments or questions of Charles? Would you like to pose a question?
Yeah. Sorry, my mistake. I'd just assumed that one red was also the other red. But anyway. So
so we take your question about Waslow.
So it's just a bit about the Waslow estate plan. Yeah. So exactly what does the plan cover? And it says that there's due to a staffing lack of what's the exact word? Gap in staff resources. So has that gap now been filled? Will we actually be able to achieve this in 25-26 as indicated?
Yeah. Phil?
Yep, I'd say it's actively being addressed. So we have just engaged an external firm to give us some interim capacity in our estate management. Because we've had a retirement, we've had 2 retirements actually, we've had illness, we've had difficulty in recruiting to roles. So we do now have a 6-month agreement with, can't remember who, I think it's, I won't even say the name in case it's not out there yet, but we've hired an agency to give us this capacity to progress work that the people who have been off or have retired would have done. So going forward, I think it's going to be okay. We're going to catch up. We're going to deliver urgent stuff and catch up a bit. Longer term, there is then a recruitment, still that we need to make. We need to incentivise somehow because we've been unsuccessful in the past to kind of get the permanent solution in place.
Can I just ask, at a high level, what kind of things will that estate plan cover?
Hannah's just walked in. How lovely. So, I mean, I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about kind of ongoing estate type work that needs to happen. That we're going to, the rent reviews, the progressing work. I think it's really for Hannah to be leading on that fresh look at the whole estate plan. That's not something I think. Is that right, Hannah? That's not going to be outsourced. You're going to need to lead on that.
But yes, so essentially that estate management plan, and it'll slightly come out in the forum later as part of the asset management plan, really needs to look at the intrinsic aspects of what our vision for the estate is and how we wish to deliver that. So that could be everything from disposals, asset type, land use, nature, all those key aspects will be reviewed essentially and formulated into something to take us forward. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? In which case, we have a set of recommendations before us. There is one amendment to make to that. The second recommendation, it talks about proposed 24-25, and that should be proposed 25-26, because it's proposed, not what's already gone. So on that basis, do I have anyone who moved? Janet, thank you. And second, Ken Richardson, thank you. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That's been approved. And Hannah has turned up nicely for, I think, the Worsley Moors Estate paper, which is the next one, item 16. Do we need to go?
It's 5 to 1.
Oh, no, should I do it now?
Do it now.
Okay. Before we start this item, members, it's 6 minutes to 1, according to that clock down there. I would like to finish business before we break for lunch, but that means going past 1 o'clock. So we have to accept that we move past 1 o'clock. Members in favour of that? A show of hands, just to... Thank you, members. We can carry on. That gave Hannah time to get into the hot seat. Yep. Any additional comments to the report? In which case, members, you have the report before you. Any questions or comments? Wonderful. Oh, thank you, Ken. The recommendation been moved.
Sorry, can I just ask a question?
Yes, by all means.
Have we actually made the business case separating lot 1 and lot 2?
In terms of further papers? No, so the business case was done on a whole, Simon, the original business case.
But with this proposal, which it looked at whether we made a good or a bad decision overall.
In terms of the original business case?
No,
in terms of this?
The case that you're now proposing here, which is to become a residential letting business.
Potentially become one, yeah. So basically this just gives us the opportunity to potentially let them as 2 separate entities.
Yeah.
So therefore, when the tenders are submitted, that is the acid test of the financial interrogation. So whilst I've done the musings of the numbers as to what we could potentially see as the 2 separate options and the income that could be generated from both, the acid test is really the ability to receipt the tenders and ascertain what those numbers look like.
So I suppose the reason for my question is just lessons learned here. Did we overspec the refurbishment of the farmhouse? In other words, is a 127 acre farm actually capable of supporting a residential property of that size and quality?
No, I don't think we overspec it. I think it's just that residential rents and residential tenancies are let with a whole different suite of sort of liabilities from a landlord's perspective in comparison to a farm business tenancy, and therefore the two have quite different methodologies in arriving at a rent level. So what we need to be certain of in our decision making is that we haven't missed an opportunity by letting the farmhouse in isolation, because it will take more income, could generate more income.
So we should then potentially be looking at every single property that we have on the estate and seeing whether it makes sense to separate them from the land.
Yes, as and when they come up, that should be a due consideration that the agent would make, yeah.
Okay, we should make a note of that.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, Simon. Sorry? Yeah, by all means.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, if anyone's been to the Pump Farm farmhouse, it does look fantastic. But my understanding is there were decades without any investment because of the, I think it was a 3-generational tenancy that were in that farmhouse and that didn't want any investment because they didn't want the rent to be increased, essentially. So if you look over the lifetime of that kind of our ownership of that building, I don't think we've overinvested in it at all. I think we've just brought it up to a standard, some of which we had to do anyway for kind of compliance for letting. But I agree, it does look, I mean, it is fantastic, but it's only what it should be, really.
Thank you, Phil. Kath?
Yes,
Kath
Chair.
Butler.
I'm very concerned. I've been on this authority almost 30 years, and when I first came on, there was an application for a farmer at Snitterton Road, South Darley, who put in to convert a barn, and the officer stood in front of that door and said, "You must go and live at Darley Dale." And I am very concerned whether this could be construed that we're giving priority to farms that we have a say over, and the ordinary farmer, just the normal country farmer in the national park. I think that everyone should be treated equally and fairly and equitably. So I have great concerns over this, and I don't feel I can vote for it because I feel there's a discrepancy between the two.
Yep, thank you for that comment, Kath. I'm sure that'll be taken on board. Any other comments or questions? If not, the recommendation has been moved. Do I have a seconder? Charles Reeves, thank you. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That's 2 abstentions. Thank you, members. We move on to, in that case, to agenda item 17, the Landscape Observatory funding, once Simon has not dropped his laptop. Thank you, Simon. Do you have any additional comments?
I think just to say, Chair, this is a really big bit of good news for us as an organisation, but also for National Parks family. It's a result of a sort of last 2 or 3 years at least of work that David, particularly myself, joined in with him a couple of years ago on to bring the level of evidence base and research to what we do. So yeah, just a fantastic bit of good news, really.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. I think from my perspective, also thanks to Jane Butler at National Parks England, because she was the one who I think kept the door open with DEFRA, and when it budged a little bit more open, shot in there and snaffled 500,000. So I think all praise to her for that initiative. Members, you've read the report. Any comments or questions of Simon? Matt Buckler and Janet Dugdale.
Yeah, we had a conversation. We had a conversation a little while ago about something related to this in terms of the other local authorities, around the national park. But the national park sits in 7 local authorities. Is there the opportunity to talk to them about that? Because, like, as Ginny will know, the local nature recovery strategy for Derbyshire, for example, which is the conversation that we had, the local nature recovery strategy for Derbyshire couldn't include the data that we had because it would have left a 2-tier mapping portal for Derbyshire, because we'd have had better mapping within the national park than outside it. is that is it feasible to look at that sort of stuff for all of the local? You know, it's going to be less problematic for North York Moors, but it would be an issue for here and an opportunity for here as well.
So the funding we've got is focused on protected landscapes. So at the moment, in the first year, we're working out with our academic partners just exactly how we do that. But in this first year, we're going to take out the model we've got and try it in other locations where we know we can get it digitised. The plan is that the project will run over at least 3 or 4 years. So if this year is successful and we feel, and DEFRA feel that we've met the requirements, the relatively loose requirements they've set on us, and we've come up with a quality product that works, then we can roll that out. It's called the Landscape Observatory for a reason. It's not the Protected Landscape Observatory, it's not the National Parks Observatory, it is the Landscape Observatory. We're having similar discussions, because this is focused on England at the moment, we're having similar discussions with the rest of the family in Scotland and in Wales, who are also obviously interested in taking part in the process. So the answer there is, if the funds can be found, if partners have got the funds to join in, then we can talk about that. We haven't done that yet, but David and I are going to sit down, and the team are actually going to sit down and work out how to cost that kind of involvement level. And certainly that would be the intention, yes.
Thank you, Simon. Any other comments or questions? Janet Dugdale.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. This is indeed a good news story, and it will be a shame we'll lose some of your time and David's time to be running this at a national level, but I think it's fantastic that it's happening as well. I just want to ask about the sort of governance areas, talk about establishment of the observatory, its board and steering group. What are the plans for the board and steering group, and are there plans to involve members in some way, or NPE members, or how do you see the governance developing?
So certainly in this first year, we're going to try and kind of keep it lean and practical, is I guess one way of looking at governance. And in the first instance, the board will be chaired by Jane Butler as MPE, and we'll bring in a couple of key academics, particularly Bob Johnson from Sheffield, who's funded a lot of the early work on the observatory and been a real staunch supporter of the whole project. So bring in some of that cultural heritage side as well, because obviously much of the project work focuses on biodiversity at the moment, but we hope the observatory will be much broader than that in time. And we'll bring in someone from DEFRA and someone from Natural England at a director level there. So we're going to try and keep that fairly tight. In terms of member representation, I think because it's a national project, it doesn't necessarily make sense that a PDMPA member necessarily is at that level on that. We're looking at that evolving as we go through. So at the moment, it's kind of like, well, let's just get a board going so we can get some governance of the project and get the project delivered in this year. One of my roles will be to prepare the business plan and the bid for the following 2 years, and that's kind of like a crucial bit of work that's got to happen relatively importantly as we go along, ready for all the spending reviews and those kinds of things. At the steering group level, it's a name at the moment. It's a name that sort of encompasses a group of people that will hopefully oversee the 3 main project elements, which are the AI project, the trialling of rapid condition assessment at landscape cells for habitats, and the management planning resist, accept, direct framework that was introduced to members at member training recently, or last year sometime. So again, it's kind of, let's focus on those things. Let's get those things done right this year. And I think as we go along, we'll understand what structures we need. And I think one of the things, some of these things can be a kind of an industry in organising sort of consultation structures and involvement structures. And I think that's something we need to be careful that we don't go down that route. But clearly we need to think about that. So yeah, we're at early. I hope that's just not me fuzzing around saying we're kind of thinking of it, Janet, but that's more or less what I'm saying.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I noticed you slipped in the term cultural heritage there, so our chair's happy. But I'd like to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Janet. Do we have a seconder? Charles, thank you very much. Any other comments before we go to a vote? Matt Buckler.
Yeah, it in some ways it relates to what I was saying earlier on in terms we're being tasked with being more commercial. It would be really good to look at this from a commercial point of view, because actually there are really good opportunities for this from a commercial point of view across the country as a whole.
I think that's one of the things that is under consideration, how to monetize. Yep, indeed. Thank you. And from our perspective as an authority, I think the really good three words in the report is full cost recovery is being met. So that's not always the case. So members, all those in favour show. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That's been moved. We move now to agenda item 18 for information. Thank you, Simon. For information items and report from the Chair of Programmes and Resources. Janet Dugdale.
Yeah, thank you. We have had a Programmes and Resources Committee since the last authority. It's on the 25th of April. A few items were up for approval. The first tranche were a series of people management annual reports, and some of these were annual reports we've seen for the first time. These included safeguarding, occupational health, safety and well-being, and diversity. And we also approved forthcoming objectives, diversity objectives for the authority there. And these will be presented annually to that committee for approval. We also approved a proposal to receive up to $350,000 for further access for all funding, enabling the authority to continue progress in this area. And finally, we looked at two management plan themes, or aims, landscape and nature recovery and the welcoming place. We had presentations on the first one about the local nature recovery strategy progress with local authorities, FIPL progress and the Morridge Hill project. In Welcoming Place, we looked at a range of things, including Peaks for Health, school, Ambassador School, the Youth Voice, and many, many other areas the engagement team have been working in. And finally, the committee noted its thanks to members of the engagement team for their dedication to progress during what's been a difficult restructuring process. I'd also finally encourage all members to review the Programmes and Resources papers on the management plan aims. There's a lot of really good information in there.
Thank you very much, Janet. Unless there are any comments or questions, I propose to move hastily on. There's no vote. Okay. Report from the Chair of Planning Committee, Patrick.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Not much to report, really. I reported last time on 3 departures from policy, which were going to be referred back to committee. They were all referred back, and they were all, in the event, approved. We had the normal run of planning applications, with one particularly difficult one, which under policy should have been refused, which was the conversion of a holiday house, a barn used as a holiday house, to a full-time house for a family with very personal issues which needed to be looked at. We've deferred that to see whether we can help out more than policy allows. And we've had a report on progress with planning enforcement, which is showing good promise, held up by the difficulty of recruiting one of the planning enforcement officers, and of course in recruiting a more junior solicitor to Angela, who's having to fend off all sorts of things on her own at the moment, and it does clearly slow down the work that we can do. Maybe it's a comment upon the market forces in the employment market, but filling those posts is becoming more and more urgent if we're going to continue to make progress.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm assuming no comments or questions, so we can move on to agenda item 20, reports from outside bodies. None have been submitted, in which case members have to take the motion the public be excluded, so we can move to part B of the agenda. All those in favour? Any against? No. Any abstentions? Thank